Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. Lyanna never thought that she would be happier on finally seeing Fort Granger, the first base connected to a stone bridge through a river leading to familiar Harrenhal territory. Their trip here had been quite eventful. Apparently carrying 3 Valyrian swords with you was more than enough for bandits and brigands to try their damnedest on slipping a knife on your ribs. Thankfully, the Goldcloaks guard group that accompanied them is more than enough to scare off most of them. The few that dared try their luck met a swift end via Unsullied Honor guard spears, who had sworn after Lyanna's near-death experience never to let a single hair of her head be hurt. The Goldcloaks' retinue of theirs remained until they arrived finally at Granger's Crossing, basically a bridge made of cement connected to a palisade fort that indicates the entrance to the lands of Harrenhal. There were 3 of these crossings she had commissioned beforehand through choke point rivers: Fort Ronald guarding the bridge leading towards the territory of House Shawnee, Fort Lovegood overlooking the river to the east outside House Hopwick's territory, and in retrospect, the Vale, and finally Fort Granger overlooking the south, largest of all the 3. The forts are simply structures, heavy palisades of wood seasoned with tar and an outer layer of cement. Space at the inside for tents of the 500 soldiers in rotation, cooking areas, training yard, and an officer's quarters. Simple, but effective to block the passing through the bridges on the rivers. She actually got the idea from the damned phrase, "Say what you will about the weasel-like bastards, but whoever their ancestor is, he made a damn good decision about that castle upon a bridge." "Are you all right, Myrcella?" Lyanna asks the princess inside her simple carriage of red and yellow. Lyanna had opted to ride in a horse instead of a stuffy carriage beforehand. It is her first time to see this part of the country, after all. "Yes, but I think Ray is going to be sick again," Myrcella replies with a wince. "I don't think that the trip agrees with her, Lady Lyanna. Don't worry, we are almost inside the fort. She can puke all she wants there." Suffice it to say that Lyanna truly did not expect her 2 wayward guests. When she agreed with Tywin Lannister about the fostering of Myrcella under her, she expected it later, not immediately. A small peek, though, on the girl's mind made her understand the reasoning of those that sent Myrcella with her back at Harrenhal. Tywin was practical. He simply wished to avoid a loud argument with his daughter. With large rumors already about the rather rocky relationship between the king and the queen, the last thing he wanted was another rumor of the queen being at odds with her birth family. Robert, on the other hand, wanted Myrcella out of the capital due to the fact that he hated Dare himself. He was of the opinion that she needed to get out lest she end up a waste like him. He also wanted her out of the Red Keep in order to be away from Joffrey's bullying. If you call being shot with a crossbow to terrify your wits off bullying, that is. While she can work with Myrcella's case, it would not be hard since Myrcella practically worships the very ground she walks on. It is the latter guest of hers that throws a wrench on Lyanna's plans. Magic is a wonderful thing, and it contains mysteries that generations have tried to unravel, only to fail again and again due to the complexity and broadness that it contains. Unfortunately, Myrcella's case is one of them. Despite the depth of his knowledge as Harry the Great, Lyanna had never seen a case like hers. The resurrection stone at her neck, which Lyanna had no idea how it got there in the first place, had kept her alive. She had been killed by 100 stabs and her body thrown to the waters after being presented to Robert Baratheon. The resurrection stone, though, for reasons that Lyanna cannot fathom, unleashed its full potential on the 4-year-old girl. It resurrected her time and time again. However, the fact remains that she was 4-year-old and not a swimmer in any case. The result was her experiencing being reborn, only to die by drowning again and again, trapped in her watery grave. Lyanna does not even want to think how much she suffered, 1 trillion deaths before she levitated her out. It's a miracle that she's only hydrophobic and seemed to not want to talk. Myrcella, bless her heart, only saw a girl in need and did not even hesitate to befriend her. Emphasis on try, though. Still, even with the one-sided conversations, which is Myrcella basically talking to death the other girl, poor Rhaenys Targaryen looks loads better, other than that deathly pall she had when she first pulled her out of the water. Still, the fact remains, though, that she has in her company probably the one person that Tywin Bloody Lannister and Fat King Extraordinaire won't hesitate to extend Robert's rebellion. Worse, she rather likes the two. Tywin may be cold as hell, but she knows his pragmatism. She, after all, is the same when dealing with bloody Dark Lords. Dumbledore is wrong, after all. You can't change the world with hugging with the power of love, the bloody tossers. What's needed is bloody, grisly work where morality and nobility had no place. Robert, on the other hand, was simply hard to like. He was over-enthusiastic, jovial, and tended to go the extra mile for the people he cared, though she pitied the king. Never had Deliana seen someone so ill-suited on the leadership position, trapped in a loveless marriage and an office that literally strangles the entirety of his likes. He was a man slowly dying in a cage. She would consider it a private personal favor on making sure that his daughter would not end up like him. As for Rhaenys, or Re, as Myrcella has come into calling the 4-year-old, Deliana has two choices. Either another extension of Robert's Rebellion 2.0, or she keeps quiet about this. The choice is obvious. She is a Gryffindor through and through, and a bleeding heart at that. What would Myrcella say if Reborn is surrendered and gutted to be added on the small pile of dead Targaryens? Besides, Deliana is not a child killer. With the exception of baby Voldemort, mind you, she would be an asset later when she's dealing with the Martells, which she plans to lean more on her favor. So, all hush-hush, it is. Who would believe, after all, that the daughter of Rhaegar would be this deathly pale, Dornish 4-year-old? As far as the realm is concerned, Armory Lorch had done the deed of murdering her already. Quick, open the gate! With a resounding boom, the drawbridge separating the palisade to the bridge is lowered, which Deliana's party, minus the gold cloaks, who have already left, enter. Her lips turn upward, though, at the sight of the fort. It is very Spartan in nature, with the basic necessities only present. There are no recruits here, only first-timers on duty, chipped fresh from unsullied boot camp for the experience. My lady! Welcome home! The fort centurion bows at her with his other captains. He is a balding man of 40s. Pete, right? Deliana replies in recognition as one of the Unsullied in training holds the reins of her horse as she steps down. Yes, my lady, he beams at her, recognizing him. Mind reading is such a cheat. You're planning to stay here before your way to Harrenhal, my lady. Only for a bit, she answers before indicating at the forms of Princess Myrcella, helping a pasty-looking Rhaenys to sit on the steps off their carriage. The road does not agree very well with one of my handmaidens. Unfortunately, we need some medicine for road sickness, and some of that calming draught that the green men supplied the forts with. Of course, my lady, Pete replies before turning to one of the Unsullied near him. Bring everything that our lady demands. Also some fresh milk for the princess and some hot jerky from the mess hall. The other nods before running off. Deliana takes the time to look at the fort. It seems that her construction projects is going well under the supervision of Lord Victor. She personally expects that it would be at least a couple of years before she sees any fulfillment of her construction plans to fully come to fruit. Lord Victor and the Green Men, however, exceeded her expectations, and between her intellect and awesomeness, the magical aid and numbers given by the Green Men and the ingenuity and gratitude of the former slaves from Essos, not only has her new realm achieved majority of its quota, but also manages to answer the king's call during the Greyjoy Rebellion. The dedication of her populace merits a reward, but that can wait in the future once everything is settled. Right now, though, she can't help but notice that despite Myrcella's presence on the fort, none of the Unsullied here is bowing to the princess of the realm, or even acknowledging her. Interesting. Lista Winterfell. The North. Never has Ned Stark felt so relieved than seeing the gray walls of Winterfell loom in the distance. He literally has enough of the South to last a lifetime, 2 major wars, and each time brushing shoulders with death far too close for comfort. Some may say that he has a talent already about war. Ned would rather credit it to sheer dumb luck. More times than he can count, he almost got bits of him lopped off. The army of the North that marched with him, South, have slowly dismantled on the way here, as they lead their levies home. Thank the old gods that no major lord or son of a lord died during this campaign. There is even one that is glad. Newly knighted Sir Jorah Mormont, who won the tourney down below at King's Landing, and is now bringing his Queen of Love and Beauty back to Bear Island, much to the displeasure of many of the northern lords with him, bringing a Southerner as a bride. Ned, however, wished him all the luck in the world. The Mormonts, after all, are staunch supporters of House Stark, and anything that would make their current heir happy is a good thing, in Ned's books. The familiar sight of the courtyard of Winterfell soon comes into view, and Ned can feel the weight that has been burdening his shoulders. as Lord Paramount of the North slowly whittling away. A chorus of my lords and welcome back greet him, but Ned only has eyes at the 5 souls standing near the entrance of Winterfell Keep. "Cat," he breathes, hugging his wife to himself, careful not to crush little Brandon at his wife's arms. "Thank the gods you're all right, Ned," replies his wife. "I've been worried sick about you not returning from White Harbor after that blasted rebellion. Promise me that you won't go rushing into another war, at least before telling me first. All right?" "Yes." Ned simply replies before turning his attention at the sleeping babe at his wife's arms, asleep. He smiles at the little munchkin before deciding not to disturb the baby. "My sons," he turns toward Robb and Jon at the back, who wasted no time hugging their father. "You've done me both proud. Though, Jon, you and I need some talking about what you did at White Harbor." The young man pales at the reminder of him leading the Lady Lyanna to a battlefield, which is the exact opposite of what he's supposed to have done. Robb, on the other hand, had done the sensible thing and hid, unlike his brother. When they finally let go of each other, Ned beckons to the 7-year-old boy, riding beside his small retinue, to step forward. "This is Theon Greyjoy, son of Balon Greyjoy, heir of the Iron Islands. From now on, I want you all to give him the respect he is due as his station, since he is staying with us as my ward." The Ironlander gives off a small wave at the gathered crowd, whose glares are as cold as the winter landscape they live in. Only Robb and Jon seems interested at the boy, close their age. The rest, not so much. Before Ned can try and convince, more like lie, to his new ward that he is welcome, if not outright hated, he is cut off by the jog of Maester Luwin running towards him from the Ravenry. He doesn't need words, though, to tell Ned the news. The white raven at his hand is news enough already. Winter is here. Harrenhal, temporary housing. "My lady," Delina let off one of her rare smiles as the entirety of Hold's Hamlet population bows as she dismounts from her horse. Being the nearest town, or rather, small city now in Harrenhal, it serves as the pseudo-capital of the region due to the fact that the old ruin is torn down and being replaced. "Lord Victor, this is the Princess Myrcella Baratheon, and her lady-in-waiting, Rhaenys," introduces Lyanna as an unsullied helps the 6-year-old and the 4-year-old down from the wagon they are riding. "Princess Myrcella would be fostering under me until her first moonblood. So please, do welcome her warmly." Lyanna makes sure to emphasize it to the Green Man and the Associ among the crowd. Unlike, after all, their Westerosi counterparts, their allegiance is to her and her alone, not divided into the Crown or House Tully. She has no plans of Myrcella feeling not at home here. She genuinely likes the happy-go-lucky girl. In fact, the warm attitude from her feels a little too much. Lyanna suspects that the entirety of her life she has been stifled due to her position as princess, and the ever-present cruelty from Joffrey. "Come, your highness, let us show you to your quarters. The tailors will need to take in your sizes for your dresses," says Emilia, whom she tasks to be the pseudo-caretaker for the two. Emilia is not cold, unlike her older cousin, and Myrcella warmed to her quite quickly. "Of course, Emi," the little 6-year-old replies, brightly pulling a reluctant Rhaenys after her, who is looking a lot better with some calming draft. She looks terrified as hell, though, with all the people watching. "We'll get dresses for Ragfest." "Riri, also right?" She looks so pretty, and I don't like her current attire. She bubbles, waving at the rather tattered form of the 4-year-old's dress. Lyanna didn't manage to buy her a change after he found her. Can't risk Robert's Rebellion 2.0 after all. "Of course, your highness, come." "Yippee, come re-ray-ray. I think red and yellow will look splendidly on you," she chirps, happily uncaring with all the stares, as she follows Emilia towards one of the tailoring shops. "She's certainly energetic, my lady," comments Victor, as the three is swallowed out of sight. "Tell me about it," snorts Lyanna as she walks towards the town square, the death dealers of Lord Victor immediately forming into an honor guard around the two of them. The people, seeing that the excitement of their lady's return is over, slowly dissipates, though some still stare at her in wonder. "So, is there anything that needs my attention, Elder?" Lyanna asks, making sure to address Victor in his original title, an Elder of the Green Men. "Just some updates on our progress, my lady," he answers, taking a ledger from one of the death dealers, which he begins flicking through. "Trade for the spices, my lady, is at an all-time high. Nearly every land in the region is vying for the produce. We have set up auctions for that, like we do for Delionite. Speaking of the gem, we have also opened another dozen extra mines on the hills of Derry. I have sent some of my kin to start transmutating the rocks underneath into Delianite. Within a week, we can start mining proper and establishment of homesteads on those mines.
Good job, Elder. I am continuing to be astonished by you and your kin's efficiency and improvisation, says Deliana. She has sent a raven via Red Keep to Lord Victor beforehand to increase the mines of Delianite in order to fulfill the demand of Lord Tywin. The old lion is desperate for the mineral which is being soloed by the Iron Bank representatives at the auctions. Thus, one of his conditions to Marcella's fostering here that he might be able to buy some directly from her at a fair price, which is still insanely high.
I aim to please my lady, replies Lord Victor. We have also started on making the salt fields that you planned at House Root. In the next 2 moons, it would be ready. Deliana nods at that piece of information. While spices and Delianite would be her main source of income, it never hurts to have more always. After all, more is always better than less. Thus, salt, after all, is another condiment that is completely missing from Westeros or from Essos in that matter. In the history of Earth, it is in extremely high demand that at one time, nations of the East warred with one another for it. With the way she is going, she's got a feeling that she would need more land soon, if only to accommodate the projects that she plans to build, and that's not counting the long-term ones. Many of the traders, though, are wondering how long it will be before they will be able to sail north for trade. The plans, after all, for the trade route north has been postponed due to the Greyjoy Rebellion. Our markets are currently overflowing with rice that has nowhere to go. They can start sailing north as fast as the tides can take them. Elder, or rather, if they can rent the longboats for it, the North and probably the entirety of Westeros would be needing a lot of our rice as soon and as much as possible. Deliana looks at the gray sky where a single snowflake fell at her nose. She has seen, after all, the white ravens flying all over on their way here. Winter is here, after all, and my name will be great again. Newcastle construction site. Madness. This is pure madness, Matthew bemoans to himself, as he watches hundreds of gardeners with ropes and pulleys hauling themselves up the towering sides of the hill with the big-ass artificial waterfall. He still has no idea how those green people managed to reroute a damned river. They are not even putting plants. Oh no, sir, they are not. They are putting seeds off all things, tree seeds, according to one of them. Well, Matthew is not having anything about it. If they want to plant the entire damned hill, it would be their decision. Her personally admits that the archways, houses, and gazebos at the sides of the hill is quite pleasing to look at. Who is insane enough to try using those, though? Either way, Matthew would soon be finished, and Matthew can happily collect his wages worth without risking his name. Whence? Town Hall, Rhaenys and Marcella's personal quarters. Rhaenys Targaryen, daughter of Rhaegar, and Elia would never expect that she would be here. Alive and warm, sleeping on a bed, she had lost count of that dark, unending world where the waters suffocate her again and again, that she literally lost her mind. Hallucinations become commonplace as she was revived from death. When Lady Deliana brought her out of the darkness, it was almost like a dream. Still, she reveled in it. A fantasy where she was rescued and even managed to find a friend. She expected any moment then that she would wake up and the entire process of drowning will start all over. She's almost scared to close her eyes. Maybe next time she opened them, it would be the darkness all over. She had lost count of time. Yet here she is, about to sleep, calm and refreshed. After the draft that Lady Amelia gave her, the familiar pain of her brutal first death did not bother her psyche any longer. Amory Lorch, after all, stabbed her 100 times after her first few stabs did not work. She felt them all, though. Each dozen stabs, dying only to be alive again. She turns from her current featherbed to the sleeping form of Marcella hugging a lion plushie, an original toy that Deliana gave to her before. When she visited, Rhaenys likes her. Sella is very kind to her, and she chases the bad thoughts away with her bright presence. Yes, Sella can be her friend. Just like Sir Arthur, who waited her on those dark waters, always promising her that help is on the way. They would start lessons tomorrow about something called values, something that Lady Deliana would be personally quizzing them. Everything would be all right, just as Sir Arthur always told her in the waters. I'm about to sleep now. Sarah Verdane. Looks like you're right after all, she yawned sleepily to the ghostly visage of the night watching over her. The continuous gusts of snow outside invites the cold air that Deliana shivers inside her soul. Despite the closed windows, it has been a month, ever since her return here at Harrenhal and the start of winter. Suffice it to say that she is caught off guard by the difference of the winter here at Westeros than the winter that she knows back in her original life. During her tenure at Old Town and studying, more like shamelessly photocopying, the priceless tomes that the Maester Order had been accumulating throughout the centuries, she, of course, read about the winters here at Westeros. She had laughed back then. Seriously, who would believe about winters lasting for years that leave behind death, cold, and devastation? She had happily assumed then that the reason for their rather descriptive outlook of the bad weather was because of their simple-mindedness. The world here, after all, was akin to the Dark Ages, with barely touching the feudal and Middle Ages of the modern world. It would not be surprising to her that the unlearned people that call this world home would know the basics of preparation when it comes to bad weather. Suffice it to say, her opinions are rather proven falsely by the extremely bad weather outside. Sure, when she looks outside, one might assume that it is just light snow falling from the sky to the lands covered by Harrenhal. Emphasis, however, on it is snowing outside. When she first decided that the territory of Harrenhal would be her lands and her base of operations and refuge, she and the other green men under her command have warded the entirety of the territory she possessed with weather-negating runes and blessing runes. She would be investing heavily, after all, in agriculture, and she would rather look idiotic in everyone's eyes if the new crops she is introducing do not bear fruit. The soul runes that fueled the wards are powered by the life essence of the ghosts here, which seems to be extra abundant at Harrenhal. They literally supercharge the runes that would regulate weather in a way that the crops would need to prosper, thus seeing that snow and cold winds still pass, despite the fact that the runes are all operating in full power, speaks volumes of how bad it must be on the world outside not being protected by her magic. She mentally thanked her paranoia of trying to be prepared as possible of eventualities. At times like these, it does save the day. Her attention, however, right now is at the letters currently laid out at her desk. Each contains the seals of Lord Paramounts and even that of the Hand of the King. 2 weeks ago, before the worsening of the weather, she had sent the first shipment of rice and salted turkey meat to the north with barrels upon barrels of fire whiskey via long ships. The Warden of the North had not been idle. The moment he received the White Raven, Ned Stark had sent an agreement contract between Winterfell and Harrenhal wanting to purchase thousands of sacks of rice, meat, spices, and whatever fruits that would not perish along the journey. Like her, he knew that he must get the first dibs on the supplies before the others can. The Greyjoy Rebellion, after all, had taken a lot out of the realm. Armies need provender to run, and many storage lards of many lords were emptied in order to equip and feed their levies during the campaign. Worse, the Reach and the Riverlands were two of the most majorly hit by the Ironborn raids during the first salvo of the war. Farms and small villages had been decimated and razed by the pillage-worshipping pirates, and many small folk that usually grow such fields were either dead or taken as thralls. The two food granaries of the realm barely managed to recover when winter slammed into Westeros. This, of course, made Deliana's main agricultural product, Nanza spices, more valuable. It was not long after the first longship arrived at White Harbor carrying the goods that the letters of the other Lord Paramounts and High Lords come knocking at her door. Tywin Lannister asked, surprisingly in a polite way, that she allocate at least some of her rice to sell at the Westerlands. He even waived off the taxes for selling at his lands, as long as she sold food at the Westerlands, and even offered her merchants a permanent stall at Lannisport with all the protection it needs. She had happily allocated some supplies to the rather harried-looking caravans that braved the weather from the Westerlands. Amira, her half-brother, on the other hand, were once more the interim Lord Paramount of the Riverlands, much to the horror of the Riverlords. Once more, he demanded that she sold her land's produce at the Riverlands in an extremely low amount to boost the shortage, since apparently we're family, and family duty honor is House Tully's words. Adiliana promptly used his letter as fire kindling. There were also several requests from Lords of the Reach, basically those whose larders were used as supply for the army that crushed the Greyjoy rebellion, about buying from her. The Tyrells and many other more well-off-to-do keeps not damaged by Balon Greyjoy's bid for freedom were keeping their granary supply under lock and key. For good reason too, nobody knows, after all, how long this winter will last. Deliana can't fault them. If she was in their shoes, she'll be doing the same. Of course, since she had magic, the ultimate cheat, she can happily skip those woes. Same letters also came from Dorne, the Vale, and the Crown Lands, each requesting to be able to buy supplies from her. The capital, funnily enough, did not request to buy rice, but fire whiskey in 3 times the usual amount that the capital orders. All in all, the once full storehouses of Rice Point are now running on empty, and the past 2 harvest containers are simply vacant of any rice sacks. Now, where once it held thousands and away, the rice business of Deliana boomed overnight. The North, of course, is her main buyer, as she originally intended. Now, one might wonder why in the world is she prioritizing a kingdom who cannot even pull the necessary funds that they might afford the large amount of shipments of rice from her. Why not make the West the primary buyer? Especially since Lord Kevin, Tywin's brother, seemed to have developed an extreme liking to rice, instead of the poor Northerners, minus the fact that she is half related to the Lady of Winterfell. "Shella, come here," Deliana calls out to the older of the 2 permanent residents of her private solar, who is reading one of her science books. Due to the rather lack of castle at the moment, with Harrenhal going non-existent and her designs of a new castle still pushing to finishing line, her current abode is the rather private suite created for her by guilds at the town hall of Hold's Hamlet. Due to the rather lack of royal rooms at the moment, she has agreed that the 2 young girls stay with her. Her suite, after all, is large enough to accommodate 5 people and even has some space to spare. Myrcella, of course, was thrilled by this, and Rhaenys, who seems to have taken like a fish onto water. Myrcella's friendship follows the 6-year-old royal. She has to ward her private room, however. She needs a place, after all, where she can practice her magic freely. "What is it, Delia?" the small princess asks, sitting in front of her study. Rhaenys, who is lying on the rug, simply looks up before shrugging and returning to reading her own science book. "The North cannot pay for all the rice and meat that they have ordered from me." "Sella," Deliana says, placing a map of the North in front of the smaller princess. "Thus Lord Stark offered me an alternative. Since he doesn't have the money, and I am not willing to give the food he needs via credit, he's planning on paying me by land at the North, to be more specific. If you are in my place, Sella, which area will you choose that would serve as payment for Lord Stark to give?" Delia, I'm only 6, Myrcella replies, nervously looking at the map. "I am not qualified to give you advice on these." Deliana only smiles at her. She looks terribly adorable with those puffed-up cheeks. "Yes, you are right, Myrcella. But your position as a princess of the realm does not excuse your age. Someday you will make decisions that will affect hundreds, if not thousands, of lives. It's better you start practicing. Besides, I'm not asking for a right answer, Sella. I'm just asking your opinion." "You won't get mad if I answer wrong?" she asks, still with a tinge of doubt. "Nope. Now come, let us see how far you are in your studies." Deliana gestures again at the map. The small princess, in front of her, gulps before taking the large map in her hands. Deliana almost smiles as the nervousness slowly disappears from her eyes. The more she looks at the map, Myrcella is a natural when it comes to geography and terrain. As far as she observes, that's why the princess loves her science books. Compared to other avenues of her studies, she makes a mental note to bring her along with her once she finishes the majority of her plans here at Westeros. "It would be here, Delia," she points at Sea Dragon Point. "Oh, and why should you choose such a location so Shella?" Delia asks with an encouraging wave of her hand. The small princess seems to take a breath before beginning. Sea Dragon Point, according to the Book of Lords and Territories by Maester Brutus, is a land that is totally worthless. There are no mines there, and the land is too wet for the growing of wheat or any kind of crop. It is nothing but an assortment of hills and bogs. According to the book, ancient ruins of strongholds of the first men still lie there, while the highest of its hills contains circles of weirwood. Majority of the wildlife there, however, are otters in its icy lakes, salmon on the rivers, clams along the shore, and colonies of seals. Alright, good point on narrating everything about that. There is need to know about Sea Dragon Point, Sella. I'm assuming you have a reason for saying all those. "Yes, Delia," the princess now answers excitedly. "You see, Sea Dragon Point is useless to others, but it will be perfect to colonize with what you have here at Harrenhal. There are no mines there, since it's a land full of hills. Dalia, but Dalianite might be there. After all, Dalianite cannot be found on mountains, but hills. The investment on trying to find some possibilities there would be nothing compared to success. The land is too wet for the traditional food here at Westeros. But rice grows on wet climate well enough. There are large tracts of space open there, plains that can support rice. As for the ruins, I don't know, maybe some training camps for the Unsullied. Dalia, I've heard rumors on the marketplace that they are planning to expand some of the training camps, and they are having trouble finding space. Sea Dragon Point would also make a fine harbor. It is, after all, beside the sea and near the northeastern part of the Wolfswood. With a harbor there, it would open trade to Essos and Bear Island. I don't know, is there something else I missed? No, nothing. Good job, Sella. I am impressed. Diliana simply replies, taking back the map of the north from the table. Really? The small princess beams and Diliana can almost see the stars shining on her eyes. Yes, you're brilliant, princess. You did well. Now why don't you take a break from your studies and explore my personal pensieve for an hour or so, Deliana says with a shooing motion. Yay! Raideray, wake up! Marcella Body tackles the smaller girl who had fallen asleep during their discussion with her science book atop her head. Marcella does not wait for the unhappy squawk of the younger girl to finish before hauling her to her feet and dragging her to the next room where Deliana has set her pensieve. I want to watch more about Iron Man. No, I want to see dinosaurs and dragons. The rather unhappy protest of Rhaenys' echo along the halls. Said owner of the magical item only smirks as she watches the two disappear with the usual loud ruckus of children. It had been a spur-of-the-moment action for her to untrusting the two on watching from her pensieve. She had been tired and weary after the usual long accounting of money they were getting from all the rice imports. They started weighing it in bags instead of counting because of the 100-fold returns. And Marcella had pestered her for another story about the heroes. Brain bouncing around her skull due to her long day, Deliana had pointed to her the extra pensieve which she had made where installed most of her memories about different movies. It serves as her television since there is no television here at Westeros. And the theater acting sucks. The girl had instantly been hooked. Deliana realized her mistake too late and might have obliviated her. Marcella's bright smile, however, stopped that thought dead in its tracks. The girl was happy, truly, and she can't find it in her heart to erase it. Thus she had lied, telling her that she bought it from a merchant and it was magical, able to transform thoughts into projections on the water. Marcella, bless her soul, seemed even more happier and awed as she simply took her for her word, and even dragged Rhaenys to join her after Deliana made the two promise never to tell anyone, as if anyone would believe them. Her days then were plagued of trying to explain the modern stuff that the two didn't understand. Currently, though, Deliana stares at the map of the north that she and Sella had been perusing. A sly smile appears at her lips as she stares at the image of Sea Dragon Point. Alone, she might have never thought of even half of those things that Marcella had told her about the area. In fact, she personally would have never even thought of choosing Sea Dragon Point, and even in the advent that she did, it would be for a harbor to Essos only. Yes, she can work with all those that Marcella had told her, and even add her own touches now that she knows about the area. Thank you, Marcella, for your contribution. Now, what to give you as a reward, though? There must be tithes given to the Sept. The Seven demands it. You think all these successes of yours are because of your own strength? It is the Seven that blesses the fields, that gives you strength. It is the Seven that makes your rice grow, that makes the waters give forth life. It is only right that you should give back for the Septs and to its servants. What then will the servants of the Seven eat if they don't have money from you? It is divine law that you give money to the servants of the gods. Ignore this plea and the Seven will smite you down, and everything that you think that makes you great. Amelia massages her forehead as the familiar septons that declare the word of the Seven once more preached on the raised days they set for themselves at the town. While the majority of the citizens of Harrenhal, after all, are free slaves, there are septs here that are remnants from its time before Lady Daliana. Now said septons are literally throwing their weight around demanding money for tithes from the new locals. Of course, with them being from Essos, many practically worship other gods or even no gods. That does not deter the faith, however, from their non-stop preaching. At worst, they are nothing more than an ear sore for everyone. Still, it is a disruption of the peace every day hearing the usual threats of fire and brimstone. Amania, who is a follower of the old gods, being a green man, almost scoffed when she read the seven-pointed star, the holy book of the faith. All doggerel, in her opinion. Why in the world would gods need money from their creation? They are gods, they have power, they don't need money. What in the world would they use it for? Still, while many simply tolerated the septons and septas and treat their daily threats and demands as an occurrence of everyday life, she better nip the issue on the bud. She'll bring it to Lady Delena later once she finishes buying the food for the market. Their lady has a penchant of turning problems into advantages, after all. As to why she is buying food, the two adopted wards of their lady, despite their miniature sizes, are ravenous when it comes to eating. Apparently, they took a liking to many of Harrenhal cuisine, taught to the cooks by Lady Deliana herself. While much of the larder of the town hall is free for their lady, the two went over it faster than a band of locusts. It is a miracle that the two munchkins didn't get fat yet. Still, she is here shopping, as Deliana calls it, though it's more like collecting since the people just give to her the products she need after seeing that she is their ruler's personal bodyguard. What a life indeed! 1 week after the decision to colonize Sea Dragon Point. This, unfortunately, would be the exact opposite of the narrow sea, my lady. I think you are misinformed. Maester Melon says, making the twitching in Deliana's eyes increase. Let that be the last time that I make a decision without double-checking things. First, she mentally grumbles to herself before looking once more at the positioning of Sea Dragon's Point at the north, after her rather abrupt test. More like gleaning of information from Marcella, she had responded to the letter of Lord Stark via messenger. Since ravens could not brave the outside storm of snow beyond Harrenhal's borders, about the plot of land that would serve as payment for the goods that the North purchased for her. Color her surprise that when she once more reviewed the things that would be needed for the colonization and she found it out that Marcella got the map inverted in her head. Sea Dragon Point is not at the edge of the continent facing the narrow sea, rather it is at the exact opposite of the continent. She almost screamed to herself in frustration. The very point of a port which Harrenhal and its controlled lands are lacking currently is a port of their own that connects directly to the sea. Sure, they have Portsmouth that connects via river to the Bay of Crabs, then to open water. However, while the long ships can make the trip easy, the rest of the larger ships carrying goods and payment back cannot due to the narrow crossing of the river. It's basically a highway for long ships only. Something that a trading center like Harrenhal is slowly becoming, and it is not good. Still, she cannot wholly blame Marcella for making a mistake about her geography. The Princess of Time, after all, is split between studying about the 101 houses of Westeros, learning what is expected of her as Princess of the Realm, and that's not counting the basic educational classes that Daliana asks to be mandatory for all growing children here at Harrenhal. It is basically the basic science, math, language, health and sanitation, values, physical education, and the such, things that normally are taught at elementary levels back home. Normally, the maesters would never allow such prolific sharing of knowledge, but with Harrenhal's borders locked down tight due to magic and everyone that calls itself its citizens high drunk on loyalty potion information can be rather sparse or impossible to get out. Even Maester Melon, who personally dislikes her decision about implementing education to the common people, would rather saw off his own arm than betray her. As for Marcella, she is only 6 and does not have the life hack cheat that Deliana has. Mind reading and magic. In fact, Deliana knows that once the magic part of her is removed, Marcella would beat her intellectual wise. It is not surprising that, with everything that she has been learning, the small princess missed the little fact that her information about the continent is inverted. Besides, Deliana can never truly get mad of those puppy eyes. What to do, though? She mentally asks, wordlessly gesturing for Maester Melon to put instead the large map of the north at her table. Her eyes wandered to the familiar choke point of Moat Catelyn. For a passing minute, she seriously considered messaging Eddard Stark about rearranging her proposal about Sea Dragon Point and choosing Moat Catelyn instead. It is a fortress after all, and control the only passageway north. She holds it, She can toll it to hell and back and no one would protest. She personally discards it, though, since it's so Frey-like behavior. The lands around Moat Cailin are almost the same as that of Sea Dragon Point. Surely she can bribe the Lords of the North with some Delionite to make them cave. The more pragmatic part of her knows, though, that that idea of taking possession of Moat Cailin would be nothing more than a dream for her. The Northerners are a stubborn lot, and despite their rather bad maintenance issue of the ancient stronghold, they would never give it up. Why should they, after all? The fortress might be in a dilapidated state, but it still controls the road north, and any army from the south would still find it near impossible to break down. No, they will never give it up for any amount of gold, especially from a Southerner. She knows she cannot simply bamboozle the Northern Lord into falling into her demands. The damned Northerners are stubborn enough that she fears that Confundus charm or even Imperious curse might be thrown off. Mind influence magic is, after all, the trickiest in the field of magic. If Lord Stark is wise, he would assign it to one of his sons to inherit. Back at her problem, though, she's stuck with Sea Dragon Point at the moment. Short of doing a Magellan and circumnavigating the world, she could see no solution at her current predicament. Unless, of course, I make the solution myself, the answer is pathetically obvious to her that Deliana laughs out loud without warning, making Master Melon back off in surprise. And no small amount of fear, thanks to the hysteria lacing her laugh. I've been stuck too much here in this land that I almost forgot that when there's no way out, magic will forge the way. Winter fell, the north. Powerful gusts of wind buffeted the ancient castle of the Starks, and the land surrounding it. Visibility is 0 and below. The only people moving both at Winterfell and Wintertown are the poor guards who earned the Master-at-Arms' ire one way or another. The odd farmer carrying what little produce it could add to the inventory of food at Winterfell, and the usual die-hard merchant caravans that brave the winters here at the north in order to get the supplies of food to the different keeps and castles from trading cities like White Harbor and Wintertown. With the weather as bad as it is, this forces the majority of the people to skulk inside their keeps and homes. In the case of the Starks, they stayed inside the main keep of Winterfell, where the heat of the warm springs under the castle at least drives off the worst of the cold. Other than the biting cold and the freezing temperature, the next enemy of said residents of the keep is hunger. However, with the miracle grain, as the locals of the north is now calling rice present, the next enemy is boredom. Ha! The sound of wooden swords sparring can be heard as two boys duke it out on the now cleared main hall of the keep. Surrounding them are the majority of the male folk that usually runs the castle, cheering as the two batter each other black and blue. Of course, seeing that the two whacking each other are boys of the age of 6 and 7, the bets lean into who can take the most beatings before finally either collapsing or losing their cool and jumping their opponent. "The boys are learning patience, my lord," comments Sir Roderick to Eddard Stark, making the Warden of the North smirk as Jon ducks over a sideward swipe of Robb before counterattacking. The two knows only simple sword strikes at the moment, but it is obvious that they have potential for this certain skill. "They do have potential. They are of my blood, after all," he answers while mentally thankful that neither of the two inherited the famous wolf's blood that plagued both his siblings. He can recall how unhappy and restless both Brandon and Lyanna when cooped at the keep during winter. Jon and Robb are thankfully more composed, and Sansa prefers more to listen to the Septa stories rather than participate in the more handsy stuff that her older brothers do. Ned, the sharp tone of Catelyn makes both men turn. Eddard, who have known Catelyn enough, knows of course that his lady wife is using her less than happy tone. That always leads to an argument. Sir Roderick, sensing the danger, also hastily makes a retreat, making Ned glare at the back of the night, joining the betting pool. Traitor! Ahem, Ned, dear husband, what is this for someone a lot smaller than him? The tone of his wife already gives Ned the worrying thought that he'll be sleeping outside of his room again. Turning to face her, Ned's eyes immediately notice the letter on her hand, and he mentally kicks himself for leaving it at the top of his table instead of hiding it in the drawer. Cat,
Don't you cat me. Her voice is like a whipcord, making Ned give off a small whine, more like a puppy, rather than the ferocious direwolf that is the sigil of his house.
She is a bastard, Ned. A legitimized bastard, but a bastard, nevertheless. She hisses like a locomotive, making the men down on the betting pool to turn at the new source of entertainment. Her very presence undermines that of Edmure at the Riverlands, and she's a sin on itself. How can you sell her land from the north? Eddard gives off a large mental sigh. This has been a point of contention between him and Catelyn. His lady wife doesn't like very least the presence of her younger sister down at the Riverlands. At first she had been rather quiet about it, when the news was first given before. However, when the Lady Lyanna started making waves, suffice it to say that the Tully in his house did not take such victories of her sister lightly. First she complained about her not being ladylike, then the legitimization after that about bastards usurping lands that do not belong to them, then the next, and the next, and the next. And the Riverlords don't like my brother because of her presence. It is bad enough already that we are buying food from her when we should be buying from my father. What are you thinking, paying her with land, Ned? Ned rubs the splitting headache growing inside his skull. As I've said before, as I've said 100 times, my lady, the North can't pay for all of the rice that we ordered. That's why we have to bargain with land if we plan to get a shipment for their next harvest in the coming 2 months. The Riverlands could, she begins, only for Ned to cut her off.
Not cover the needs of the entire North, Ned replies sternly. The Greyjoy rebellion damaged a lot of your father's lands, Cat. Even now they barely have enough to survive themselves, much less sell to us.
The Reach prices are 6 times that of the ones the Lady of Harrenhal is selling. We would be so heavily in debt that we would be paying not only taxes to the Iron Throne, but also spend the next 3 years paying for the first shipment only of the grain we might order from them. That's not counting the fact that they also, like the Riverlands, are hit hard by the Ironborn. Compared to the interest rates of the Reach, Lyanna's payment of Sea Dragon Point is fair and would not harm the North in the long run. But she's a bastard, Ned! A monster born from sin, hisses Catelyn, throwing the letter to the floor. She has no right to act natural born or gain the benefits of one. The gods have already dictated her position in this life, and I'm telling you, Ned, one day she's gonna get it, and those that allow her to do so...
Ed simply doesn't know how to answer. Compared to the North, the South can be more brutal to bastards. Sure, bastardry might not have a good reputation here in the North, but compared to the South, it is almost mild. The faith of the Seven especially makes emphasis of bastards as beings of sin and lust, a manifestation of all that is wrong in the world.
Good mother or not, Catelyn Tully is a Southerner. Cat, I'm telling you that she... Ned never manages to finish his words as, without warning, a powerful tremor nearly throws him off his feet. If not for his quick reaction on holding onto the high seat, Ned might have face-planted. As it is, the others inside the keep are not so lucky. Stones fall as the more loose parts of the keep break down. More than one guard is crushed by falling debris from the ceiling. Ned looks frantically at his sons at the hall. Thankfully, Ser Roderick have pulled the 2 off and are hiding now at the bottom of a large table. Nearby, the panicked cry of Catelyn makes Ned turn towards his wife, who has curled up at the side near the fireplace, hugging her knees to herself. The shaking continues hard, and it takes all of Ned Stark's control to drunkenly jog towards his wife. He almost lost his feet multiple times on the few feet that he needs to cover. The very earth seems to be groaning as the shaking continues, and the last few steps are tricky as he almost eats dust in the fireplace beside his crying wife. Come on! We need to go outside, he shouts at his wife, who simply nods in negative, making Ned grit his teeth. Come on, woman, we need to go, or else we will bury it with the entire castle. I can't, she wails, shaking off his hand. Let's go, he roars, pulling her to her feet, despite the shaking towards the main doors. He knows, of course, that they need to go outside. That's the best place they can go to be the safest. Maester Luwin, bless his soul, has already pushed the wide doors open, the dusting winds of winter getting in greedily, finally. Some of Winterfell's servants are already out on the open ground, stumbling drunkenly as the entire earth shakes and groans. Ned, on the other hand, is simply pleased that Septa Mordan is already out, carrying on her swaddling clothes. A baby, Arya with Sansa and her friend Jane Poole already outside, hugging the ground, and decked in furs. Get everyone out! Out everyone! Ned shouts as the entire keep rumbles, even more with the earthquake showing no signs of stopping, but actually increasing in strength. Thankfully, the rest of the people inside the hall are able to keep their wits with them as they all trush through the large open door of the keep, choosing winter over falling rocks. Sure, more than one lost their feet and have to be hauled and dragged by their companions, but they managed to get out, which is the best thing to happen. Ned himself managed to rush out, the cold, biting winds of winter cutting through his fur coverings like wet tissue. As he face plants on the ground, with the cold sapping the strength of his entire body, the shaking still continues. Somewhere at the middle of the Wolf's Wood. Amazing! Victor watches in awe at his vantage point as it seems the entirety of the North is screaming in fury. He had always believed the prophecy of their lady and about the power and knowledge she wields. However, to see her do it with his own eyes, this is the power of a god. There Deliana stands with a large crystal gem at her right palm, both hands raised left and right. Below, the very north shrieks in agony as the entire land from the White Knife River heading towards Sea Dragon Point slowly moves. A large crack is forming in the ground, river, and seawater pouring through the crack, connecting the northeastern part of the north to the White Knife River. The crack extends for miles, creating a massive canal where even a war galley can sail with space. It basically divides the north through the middle, with the canal widening already the White Knife River, and extends via Castle Serwyn, cutting through the Wolfswood and slowly extending till it reached Sea Dragon Point. Here they are, standing at a ruined tower at the Wolfswood, an ancient relic from the first men that once lived here. He can see the entirety of the result of his lady, an entire continent changed, and all because of focal point explosions using supercharged explosion runes buried deep on the ground. As far as Victor can understand it, Deliana wants to make use of Sea Dragon Point after the rather ill advice of Princess Marcella. The area is a gold mine, but unfortunately it is rather pretty useless due to its geographical location. Of course, seeing that it would be folly to ask for another exchange of price from the north, she instead chose to make it useful the unconventional way. After transporting them somewhere on the outskirts of White Harbor with some of his most trusted men 2 weeks ago, they started planting the runes in a straight line via points that their lady indicated to them. The runes would act as communication rings, accepting command and power from the main caster, basically their lady, who would then wake them up. It worked splendidly, like a god groaning in pain. The very earth cracked when the runes were activated, and Deliana used it to open the very land with extreme effort. It was not easy, of course. They had to harvest almost the entirety of 300 ghosts near a fallen bridge at Harrenhal that used to be a battlefield in order to power the supercharged runes. It was not easy work, and the coordination and dedication needed was demanding and dicey. They were green men, though, and their messiah asked them for their help, and they did their work well. Now, as they see the new canal of the north for Lord Victor and the Green Men, it is a miracle that can only be achieved by their Messiah, who made the impossible possible. 1 year after the roar of the North, the sounds of clashing blades are heard on the private backyard of the town hall of Hold's Hamlet. These days, however, it is a common occurrence, and the usual Death Dealer guards pay it not much attention as they continue their usual vigil on making sure that the perimeter of the town hall remains safe. At the back, however, on an improvised private training area, the forms of Marcella and Deliana can be seen fighting one another. Clad both in brown form-fitting leathers, training outfits specially ordered from Dorne, the two wield dulled curved sabers as they sparred against one another. For any observer, however, it is more like dancing, as every move is fluid and coordinated, every step a purpose, every movement an attempt to strike or dislodge. At first glance, one might never have guessed that their ages are both 7 and 7.5 name days old. They are tall, willowy, and graceful, like the cunning giant cat predators that call the desert of Sathareos their home. One is golden-haired, beauty-spun like gold despite her young age, and the other is a raven-haired beauty with streaks of dark red in her hair. For Marcella, this is the highlight of her day, as she twirls together with her teacher and friend as their blades skirt each other's edge before striking like snakes, meeting only for a split second before turning again into another form. It is a coordinated fight and a dance at the same time. Luthien Kichwalvi, Deliana calls it a form of fighting that she learned by hiring a teacher from one of the free cities of Essos. A couple of months before, when she took an impromptu 2-month leave from Harrenhal, it is specifically designed for women who desire to wield a sword. Its focus is not to put the user into a challenge of strength where the physical advantages of a man might overcome a woman, but rather makes her move and strike in ways that would both confuse and kill her enemy. The fastest and efficient way possible. If one would tell Marcella that she would be training and practicing with swords before, she might have laughed at the suggestion as she parries another strike of Deliana, aimed at her collarbone though. She enjoys it. Never in her entire life does she feel alive. The past year, sufficed it to say, was the best in Marcella's life. She was free, something that she never had during her younger years. Back at the Red Keep, she had to watch out for her every movement. Every word she said was weighed and every action taken into account, lest she offend someone she should not. Family name is everything, and it is your duty and responsibility never to besmirch it, her grandfather once said to her during his rare few visits at the Keep. She had struggled every moment of her younger years to live up to it back then. Add the stress of a bullying brother that was completely evil incarnate, and a broken family with a mother that barely cared for her and a father that never had time. It was a lonely experience. Not here, though, at Holds Hamlet. Here she is, free to be herself, plus the rather absent smell of shit. She can be Marcella without the princess attached to it. She has been here long enough to know that majority of the added population of Harrenhal and Holds Hamlet is free slaves from Essos. They could care less about her being a princess of Westeros. For them, the only one worth obeying is Deliana. Not that Marcella begrudged their belief. Even she believes 100% that Deliana is more than worth following. Screw her status as a former bastard. Whoever said that assumption must have too much to drink. The wonders and the innovation that she has seen her is all because of Deliana's genius. She even invented the aging potion that Marcella is finally allowed to drink after pestering the older girl nonstop about her secret for being so tall and mature. There are so many wonders and mysteries that she learned here, from the rain that falls from the sky to the life cycle of a random frog in the pond. Marcella is not ready to leave anytime soon. Of course not. All is flowers and peaches during her stay here. Deliana is a harsh taskmaster that demands no slacking off when it comes to learning about her studies and responsibilities. More times than one, Marcella feels as if the information inside her brain would leak out of her ears with how much the Dame of Harrenhal is forcing in. It has gotten worse when Marcella finally manages to take in the aging potion. Apparently, Deliana decided then and there that it would be a good time to start training her on self-defense. As Deliana aptly says, usually, a pretty smile will not stop a man from killing you. Sella, much less raping you before doing you in. It goes against everything that Marcella had been taught before in her younger years. It was always taught in Westeros, after all, for ladies to simply doll themselves up and leave the rest of the fighting to the men and knights. The field of battle, after all, is the avenue of men, not women. Deliana, however, challenged all of that. She proved it on Pike, and she proved it with prime samples of women adhering to the code of Westeros, suffering in times of chaos. Marcella herself, after all, had the first-hand experience of being bullied with a bloody crossbow by her own brother. There was wisdom in Deliana's reasoning. The training thus starts, and ever since then she has been battered by the Dame of Harrenhal black and blue on the sparring field. Of course, Deliana is not that cruel, and to help her save face, they constructed this sparring arena where she can train with Deliana or Emilia. It saves her pride more times than one, since face planting is not exactly a trait to be seen on a princess. Of course, her issues not only come internally from Harrenhal. No, her grandfather and father had made the right choice of making her leaving out of the Red Keep as silent as possible. According to the rumors brought about by the merchants that came from King's Landing, the rage of the queen had been great, and she nearly accidentally impaled the fat stag on his own throne when she shoved him on it. Then came the letters from her mother. First it was sweet, appealing to her sense of family, asking her of her well-being and her activities. Of course, at the end of each letter was the heavy implication that she visit her poor mother once again. When Marcella replied that it was a royal order from both her grandfather and her father that she continue her fostering and not break an agreement that shamed the family, the letters became more crude and brutal, direct demands from her mother that she come home, that it was her place not to question the Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, talking about plots and whispers of unknown enemies ready to hurt her in one way or another. When she told Deliana about it, her mentor became rather frosty in expression, and after that, no more letters came from King's Landing, which was a relief for Marcella. She had enough in her plate as it is. If not for the wonders that came from living day to day with Rhaenys and Deliana, Marcella would have complained. However, right now, she's living the dream of living her life to the fullest, even if it means getting smacked once more at the side of her head by Deliana's blade. The field outside the unnamed castle. Thousands gather on the wide empty spaces of the now finished castle that replaced the ruins that are Harrenhal. Nearly everyone on the lands that call Harrenhal their home are present, with even some from its outer territories. The open fields and spaces outside the once mighty ruin are wide and untamed. With the construction of the new castle, though, the once ugly trees that joins with the occasional swamp have all been cut down, giving off a wide space that encompasses that are surrounding it. This is the first official celebration of Harrenhal with the people, a great feast, as Deliana calls it, to celebrate the end of the false winter, as the Meisters called it, that lasted only a year. Now slowly coming to an end, it is also the grand unrevealing of the new castle of Deliana and her seat of power. There are hundreds of tables with food, rice, meat, with every culinary choice present that Deliana released over the years. Even the Unsullied, numbering. Rhaenys, of course, gets a frontal view since she is the best friend of Princess Marcella. Of course, per her friend's request, she is seated at the front row seat with faithful Sarah Cart guarding her and Marcella as always. At her side, the pale ghostly visage of Ser Arthur Dayne is also present watching the proceedings. The rest of the officers and officials of Deliana also gets the front row seat. Frankly, Rhaenys is excited. Events like these usually keeps off the horrors and nightmares of her deaths that plague her every day of her life when she's given time to herself. The new castle, in first glance, is rather unimpressive compared to the Red Keep that Rhaenys once called her home. It is, after all, a collection of giant archways overlapping the walkways connecting the giant houses of white silver with golden roofs. They are almost like giant birds perched on the sides of the hill. A giant waterfalls continue to cascade from the side of the hill, giving life to the new river that surrounds the hill and heads off to the fork. At the top of the hill is the largest of all the houses, with a tower that gleams to the sky. Ravens fly all over it by the hundreds, their squawks heard echoing from the skies above. "My people," a voice like water flowing on rock, are heard as the familiar tall figure of Deliana can be seen standing on a raised podium prepared beforehand. She is wearing a blue silken dress over a black robe, which both shows her youth and elegance, a cutting figure showing both her talent and strength of will. She does not shout, but her voice can be heard as clear as day to one end of the field to the other. One of Harrenhal's Dame Thousand Mysteries. "This is our first celebration together. We have survived the Greyjoy Rebellion. We have survived the false winter. No, not only did we survive, we prospered. By your strength, my people, by your willingness to adapt, and by your will, we have become one of the richest houses at Westeros, able to rival the great house in richness and strength. So I raise my cup to you, my people. A ruler can ask for no better citizens to lead. Cheers." Cheers! Thousands of voices echo the sentiment quite enthusiastically. Rhaenys can't blame them. The speech of Deliana is simple, easy to understand, and tickles their pride and self-worth. In fact, even she is inspired. As everyone finishes downing their cups, Deliana speaks again. "There are two things I would like to address tonight before we gorge ourselves into our food. First of all, I would like to discuss the issue of our faith. I have heard complaints throughout the year about conflicts due to our different religions. I cannot let this be for good reason. We as a people must be united in all things, and we cannot let this division come between us all. So I would like to tell you all that I am officially making this land's faith to be that of the old gods, not the new." The silence that follows is almost palpable, and for good reason. Nearly half of the population believes in the faith of the Seven, and the other half belongs to the different denominations of Essos. Very few, if there is any, believe in the old gods of the first men. Many do not like the heavy taxes of the faith of the seven, but they grudgingly still adhere to avoid damnation via septon curses. Before the first protest can be heard, however, Deliana once more speaks. This comes in relation to my second announcement. The great castle of Harrenhal is gone. This is what is replacing it, my new seat of power. This land's seat of power. It will be our pride and it will be our joy. All are welcome to visit it, be it for rest or for thought. It will be a place to seek out wisdom and unburdening to the soul, a place of contemplation, a place of peace and protection. By the grace of the old gods, I consecrate thee. Arise and be blessed and named forevermore. Rhaenys watches as Deliana, in full view of everyone, cut the palm of her hand with the knife from her belt. Crimson blood pours like streams as she walks and touches the side of the hill, head bowed and eyes closed. What happens next would erase whatever faith that the onlookers have to the 101 religions that they believe. The earth is almost shouting as a mini earthquake once more occurred. Cracks appear on the created hill, unleashing dozens upon dozens of new, smaller waterfalls. It is not that, however, that makes the jaws of everyone present to fall. No. It is rather the massive trees and plants of every kind sprouting out from the sides of the hill, growing into maturity quickly. In a matter of minutes, the once gray and dull-looking plateau of a hill, whose only monotone color is broken by the white architecture made by the engineers and artisans, are now sporting massive weirwood trees whose leaves are colored red and gold. Thousands of flowers of every kind also jut out on every surface of rock and stone. The view of the now new dwelling of Deliana is a scene that only the greatest fantasy writers can paint on a tapestry, one that a living being can never expect to see in the real world. My people, I present you to Rivendell, or in the shorter tongue, Rivendell. The blessed of the old gods declares loudly as she raises her hands on the now new fortress home, unmatched in beauty and grace, in this part of the sea. The North Winterfell, Catelyn Tully, grits her teeth as she watches the lords of the North toast the thrice accursed fire whiskey of her bastard sister down south that seems to be an all-time favorite by the Northmen. It seems to be a constant reminder to her of the accomplishments of the bastard sister of hers. Ever since the roar, as the Northmen calls it, in lieu of the giant earthquake that created the new canal that linked Sea Dragon Point to the east, down to the White Knife, everyone north and their uncle had been rather suspicious of her faith here. Up north, word of her rather detailed cursing of the bastard sister of hers before the roar happened had spread far and wide. Majority of the Northerners were of the opinion that the old gods of theirs did not agree with her opinion about base-born children, and thus, in their anger, sent the roar. It did not help that the sept that her dear husband had made for her was crushed by the falling stones. She can almost feel the smug expressions of many lords when they heard the news that the sept at the seat of Winterfell took a bad turn. Of course, last laugh was hers. However, when she convinced Ned to build a new scepter for her, it took at least a week of pestering. But in the end, her lord husband acquiesced to her demand, and with her guidance, a new sept was made even bigger than before. It was certainly entertaining watching the visiting northern lords glare angrily at the new place of worship for the true faith inside Winterfell. Speaking of which, Catelyn does not believe in any way that it was the work of the old gods disagreeing with her that brought the roar. Rather, it was the seven agreeing with her. After all, the roar brought nothing but destruction to the north. Many keeps had to do maintenance to prevent them from totally falling down, and there many deaths all over the north. The Dreadfort, unfortunately ruled by House Bolton, was the worst hit. The hill that it was sitting on collapsed and buried half the castle with it, including Roose Bolton, its lord. Dalmeric's son had to assume the position once he came back from his fostering on the Vale. Despite the destruction brought by the roar, though, the North endures, and the Northerners treated the bad occurrence as nothing more than a passing fancy of nature and simply carried on with their lives. Not much attention was paid into the new canal due to the offset of the false winter. Most of the lords were too busy either repairing their keeps or making preparations to gather here at Winterfell, as the time-honored tradition dictated at every end of a winter. The menace of her family down south, though, must be dealt with. Catelyn has only a few connections down south, and more she knows could not deal with the bastard due to him relying on her to feed the Riverlands. Her father was too sick for the headache, and her uncle had his position at the Vale, which he cannot abandon, as Knight of the Bloody Gate. Her sister is busy with her position at King's Landing, the rest of the lords. She could not hope to hold a candle against the powerhouse that the bastard built with her ill-gotten lands. She needs someone in a high enough position, probably at King's Landing, to help her and put the bastard in her place before her presence brings even more curses to the lands of hers and Lysa's. Worst, she could try usurping poor Edmure from his rightful position. Thankfully, she remembers that she has a childhood friend there at King's Landing whom she could fully trust on seeing her will done. Maybe he'll have an idea how to go about it. He is, after all, at one of the highest positions of Westeros. As she watches the Northern Lords party below with the usual chaos, Catelyn smiles as a plan comes together into her mind. First things first, though. She needs to remind the bastard of his husband of his rightful place. He is getting rather uppity due to the drastic change of the other Northern Lords about baseborn children ever since the Roar. The narrow sea... Norelos Hastar breathes in the familiar sea breeze as the ship sails across the narrow sea towards Westeros. Born and bred in Brevos, the sea is an old friend that he is familiar with, and not even the powerful waves created due to the ending of the false winter at Westeros succeed on making him feel sick. Being a representative of the Iron Bank, he has traveled on many places via boat. No wave in the known world can stop him from fulfilling the missions entrusted to him by the Iron Bank. His purpose currently is to travel into the rising star of Westeros, Harrenhal, and make contact with Lady Deliana, the first woman to be ever knighted. Rumors of her intelligence and natural ability have traveled all over the known world. She apparently transformed the lands of Harrenhal, a decrepit land with no hope and future, into an industry never seen before. Now it is the saving grace of the North and the Riverlands, as it produces enough food to challenge even the Reach, the bread and butter of Westeros in both quality and quantity. Its people, it said, live like knights instead of peasants, and the lady herself is an accomplished veteran of the Greyjoy Rebellion. Norelos, however, does not care about that. All he cares about is the Delianite. It is extremely high in demand, almost as extreme as Valyrian steel. Harrenhal representatives normally create auction which Iron Bank merchants buy everything that they can to maintain a supply line to their customers. However, word has reached the Iron Bank about the Old Lion of the West making a bargain to get direct access to the precious gem. Thus, his presence here, his purpose, is to wrangle an agreement that can get the Iron Bank a steady supply line, other than the auctions before someone else fully does. Dolomite is a gem that the Iron Bank cannot currently lose access to. Harrenhal is literally the only place in the land that it can be found. They have to make exceptions to their usual norm if its ladies start demanding stuff. Norelos, however, frowns as his eyes spy 5 ships in the distance, with square-like designs sailing almost on the same path as his. One cannot mistake the golden serpentine dragon holding a rose on its mouth at the banners. Why the fuck is the Kingdom Yeti sending ships to Westeros? Holds Hamlet in. Yes, we're rich, and our names will be remembered for this. The rather happy voice of Ellie, his second-in-command, echoes along the rooms, with many an echoed aye from the other workers.
Matthew grunts as he unhappily drinks his ale in a dark corner. Why oh why did he chose not to listen to his instincts and help build the damned place? Now he was left behind, and his name would not be remembered. Instead, some unlearned lout from his group would have his name etched on stone, not him.
Innkeeper, more ale! Kadir Baelish hums to himself as he leans on the plush couch at the private solar of one of his whorehouses. Beside him, lying at a stool, is the open letter he received from his cat, trapped up there on that cold north. Interesting. So, very interesting, he thinks to himself as he contemplates. Like everyone else, he knows, of course, of the bastard of Tully, that fool of an ingrate lord, who has given his cat to the barbarians of the north. He personally has never set his eyes on the girl, due to the fact that she is not important enough in the great game to warrant his attention. Sure, she makes some waves successfully studying with the maesters, developing the bleak lands of Harrenhal, inventing new crops, finding a new mineral that creates a new demand on the market, being the first woman to be knighted officially by a king, and the first from the south to declare for the old gods as the official faith of her territories. It is probably the most gossiped the past few weeks by many down below the neck. Apparently, after the grand unrevealing of her new castle, the new Lady of Harrenhal officially declared for the old gods, and the gods responded by making giant weirwood trees grow in the matter of minutes. Pettyr happily shoves off that piece of information. The gods are not real, and whoever shared that information in the first place must have been roaring drunk. They must have planted those weirwoods beforehand. There is no such tree that grows in minutes after all. That is preposterous, simply. Still, despite the reason why the bastard of Tully did not come into the radar of Pettyr was the simple reason that she did not show any sign of being interested in playing the Game of Thrones. Other than the fact that the king fostered his daughter to her, the amount of interaction that the girl has with any High Lord in referring to the game is not but zero. Sure, his spies tell him about the trade deal she has with the old lion, but it is a common occurrence that lords tend to do. With his cat's request, though, the girl just sealed his doom with Baelish setting his eyes on her. What to do, though? He mulls to himself. He is too busy to be more hands-on dealing with her. His long-term plans regarding the draining of the crown's accounts are way too important and meticulous to entrust with someone else. Still, he cannot simply ignore his cat's request. It is, after all, none damaging to his long-term plans. Better, it can get him into the good graces of his cat even more. Yes, he needs to get rid of this bastard. Cat simply asks him to shame her, not good enough in his opinion. Why bother shaming her, after all, when you can simply get rid of her plain and easy? Now, how can he take control of her assets once she's down, though? Time to move some pieces that will create chaos and opportunities, then. At the same time, fulfill my cat's wishes. Baelish smirks to himself, looking outside both in curiosity and expectation. Rivendell, main hall. The light of the sun shines through the open archways and windows, giving light to the entire hall. Say what you will about the builders from Essos, but they sure do know their trade. Their craftsmen have etched beautiful opaque carvings with designs of leaves, stems, and flowers on every pillar, giving each archway a unique but parallel look. Add the crawling vines and plants that entwine themselves to the masonry, and the result is a beautiful design that balances both aesthetic beauty and fortitude. The main hall of Rivendell is actually a wide-open house perched at the walls of the hill, connected to the main tower, which is the personal quarters of Deliana and her guests. 8 archways are opened on the over-large house's sides, with eerie drops to the ground below on each balcony. The 9th archway is the largest, with a large weirwood gate that needs to have at least 4 men opening it. Carved onto it is the image of Deliana raising her bloodied hand over the distant figure of Rivendell. Suffice it to say that the next few weeks after her declaration of Rivendell as her primary home and the secession of its controlled lands to the Faith of the Seven have been of much interest. Of course, not much has been seen in the primary lands of Harrenhal, now dubbed as Rivendell, in honor of her decision. Much of the populace, after all, is high drunk on nutrition and loyalty potions. The vassal lands, however, gets the occasional angry peasant protesting quite loudly about her decision. Majority, of course, do not either, because of A, Westerosi history have a lot of examples of lords cutting off balls and cocks of small folk simply because they annoy them. Under Deliana's rule, taxes are at an all-time low, and the small folk no longer experience the usual bouts of hugure they are usually subjected to under other lords. In fact, they are richer than they have ever been. C, nobody wants to risk their feelings of safety, provided by forts manned by unsullied soldiers who patrols non-stop the roads and fields. While many lords, after all, would vigilantly defend their lands from invasion, their focus are rather on their more personal keeps, not the small folk who tends to be the first targets of any invasion force. Externally, of course, the damage is even worse. Being the first lady that declares openly to the old gods instead of the faith for 1,000 years here at the South results to bad consequences. The entirety of the Riverlands literally cut off trade from Rivendell, and also the same from the Vale and the Reach. Trade on these regions literally halted to zero. Ironically, though, heads from these different houses still send their representatives to the monthly auctions when raw Delianite is being sold. There's no issue of trade from the West. No surprises there. Tywin Lannister has an iron grip on the Westerlands, and the pragmatic old lion would not let something as trivial as religion affects the day-to-day events of his lands. The North, of course, has no issue whatsoever, and would still happily buy from her every sack of rice she can produce. In fact, the Northmen are mighty pleased with her choice, and many of its lords and ladies have sent mementos, fur cloaks mostly with their personal emblems, the occasional northern forged weapon, and flora and fauna native only to the north, as signs of approval. Dorne still orders its usual large amount of spices. The Dornish, despite having the Seven as their faith, are not as high-strung as the rest of the kingdoms. The Crown Lands also stopped trading altogether, but not the Red Keep. Come hell or high water before Robert Baratheon and Cersei Lannister willingly cut off their booze supply that they order in bulk from Deliana's farms.
In response to this, Victor has ordered the mass mobilization of the Unsullied to every fort in order to secure the borders. The Death Dealers also have been more active than usual, stamping out unrest in any way or form. Still, even with the advent of trade possibilities being cut off from many of the Seven Kingdoms, the income of Rivendell still rises to epic proportions.
Currently, though, Deliana is sitting atop the raised 12-step dais on her chair. Chair is kindly describing it. The bloody thing is more like a throne than a chair. Made of weirwood, it is painted white and gold with a tree-like design on its make, a tribute to the faith of the green men to the old gods. Its armrests are made with beaten Delianite inlaid with gold, shaped like a wave on each side. Compared to the iron monstrosity that is at King's Landing, though, her throne is comfortable to sit and does not have the tendency to poke her in unwanted places. Beside the throne is 3 chairs on each side that goes into a U formation on each of the 12 steps. 4 animal statues, mad with Delianite, stand in intervals stand parallel to each other, 48 in all at the steps towards the throne. A lion, a snake, a badger, and an eagle. Lord Nurilus Hastar, Lady Yin, welcome to Rivendell. Deliana smiles in greeting at the two entering the hall. The two has arrived only an hour away from each other. Color is surprised when the representative of the Iron Bank and a delegate from UT arrived on her lands. Lady Deliana both bows in unison to her before heading to the chairs below the raised steps provided by 2 of the Death Dealers, who then returned at the side, standing in guard. Might I say it is very wonderful to put a face on you, Lady Deliana. It is Noralos who started the conversation. Your name has been uttered many times by a lot of our merchants back at Bravos. You are more beautiful than the rumors suggested for your age. Thank you, Lord Noralos, for your kind praise. Deliana replies to the man, mentally wondering why he is putting on thickly the adjectives to her. Oh, I am not a lord, my lady. Simply a humble accountant of the institution sent here to negotiate on its behalf, he replies silkily with that fake smile. It almost reminds Deliana of a certain Ice Queen of Slytherin. Of course, Deliana replies, hiding the sarcasm from her voice. Might I ask why the Iron Bank sends one of its accountants here personally instead of a letter? It is not the first time that your representatives, after all, attended my auctions. Business, of course, my lady. Important enough in the eyes of the bank, thus why I am here. Deliana watches as he reaches into his satchel and pulls out a shard of Delianite from it, clasped between his forefinger and thumb. Such a precious little thing, but one of the most wanted by so many in the world. The bank proposes that we be your sole buyer, my lady. We would be the one in charge of marketing and selling this mineral to potential buyers. Of course, as usual, we would pay for it at the highest auction price you have today. Also, at every successful business venture of ours, we are willing to give you a 15% share of the income proceedings. In return, we and only we will be able to buy from you directly. Deliana keeps an impassive face outside, but inside she is leaping with joy. She, of course, has expected that Delianite would be a high commodity. It is one of the major financial pillars of her land, barring the finished Philosopher's Stone. To have the Iron Bank as its sole buyer, not only would the price of Delianite increase due to monopoly, but income would also be doubled. After all, it would receive double, first from its usual price, and next, the percentage return. It is frankly a win-win situation. Still, I would agree to the terms of the Iron Bank account, Nelos, but only if I raise the auction price to 30%, says Deliana, fingers crossed in front of her. A totally fake, pained expression from the representative is the response she gets. That hurts my feelings, my lady. The Iron Bank, after all, would be responsible for the protection and the transport. Such involves gold and protection. The bank would acquiesce only a 10% increase. Deliana mock scoffs at that as she leans back towards her chair. Preposterous. If someone offered me a percentage higher than that, I won't be able to offer it to them due to your monopoly. I say 20%. You own me, dear lady. We would be earning so little that all we have been doing is selling without profit. 10%. Even the Lannisters can give me a better offer. 17%. Deliana yawns. The Lannisters can cut off trade anytime from you in the event of a conflict between kingdoms, which tends to happen every decade at Westeros. The bank's final offer, 15%, my lady. Deliana only smiles as she stands up and walks down the dais of her throne to the accountant, who is also up, now on his feet. Pleasure doing business with you, sir. May there be gold and fortune between the Iron Bank and Rivendell, she says, shaking the hand of the man who smiles and bows. I will be staying here for a day or two in order to iron out the final parts of the contract, my lady. I do expect your courtesy, he says with a flourish. You have it, Deliana simply replies, nodding wordlessly at one of the death dealers guarding her throne, who then leads the accountant out of the hall to the guest quarters. Lady Yin turns her attention to the middle-aged looking lady dressed in an opulent dress of red and gold with that weird golden headdress. The attire reminds her eerily of ancient China back home. My apologies for keeping you waiting, but as you well know, representatives of the Iron Bank requires immediate attention always. I take no offense, my lady. The bank has its reputation, and one must be wise to take into account that reputation always. Lady Yin replies with a demure smile. Very well then, my lady. Deliana gestures for them to sit down, facing each other. This time opting not to sit on her throne, but at the empty chair left by Norellos. I must admit, Lady Yin, that I do not expect a representative of the Empire of Yi Ti here at my lands. I am curious as to why you undertake this long journey. For the prosperity of my kingdom, of course, Lady Deliana, Yin replies before taking a large missive which she unrolls in front of the Lady of Rivendell. Deliana does not fail to notice the royal seal of the Emperor stamped into it. By order of the Divine Emperor Ling Han, I Yin Reh am authorized to carry this message of His Holiness in lieu of my trip here at the Kingdom of Westeros and in contact with the Lady Deliana of Harrenhal. It is the will of my Emperor that I, Yinreh, deliver his desires of purchasing every gram of spice that is being produced in her land for the benefit of the Empire of Yi Ti. At every single harvest, no matter the quantity, the Empire of Yi Ti would lay claim of them all with a fair and just price from her Lady Deliana. These orders will be immediate and in effect the moment the seal of this scroll is opened, and with that the representative of Yinreh closes the scroll looking at a flabbergasted Deliana. Said Lady of Rivendell, of course, are just confused as she blinks at the expectant look of the woman in front of her. Where did all these monopoly buyers come from? She wonders to herself, perplexed. She of course understands that spices are an important additive to Asian nations back at her old life, but here too. So Lady Deliana, would you acquiesce to my Emperor's request for trade? Yinri asks, making Deliana blink as she opens and closes her mouth, brain failing to catch up. You can name any price you want as an increase of your current prices, only that it not exceed 100% increase. The Empire would buy it. I'm going to be bloody rich as the Lannisters with this alone. She sweat drops knowing already how pricey the spices are at the current market. She gulps, trying her utmost to look dignified. No sense after all on trying on botching this now. She's literally being handed the great title. Soon, if this string of luck of hers keeps up, well, Lady Yin Ri, I accept the offer of your Emperor. We will coordinate with the guilds tomorrow for the price range after you've rested and eaten tonight. I am pleased to hear that my lady, to Deliana's confusion though, she takes another scroll from her robes, this time a tad bit smaller, which she does not break, but hands over to the Lady of Harrenhal. What is this? Deliana asks the representative as she breaks the seal and slowly unrolls it. A sign of a successful agreement, my lady, and a token of my Emperor's goodwill to your... Really, thank you, Lady Yin Ri, Deliana replies formally, before reading the words on the letter. Her eyes bug out, though, as she reads every word of the letter. By my will, the Holy Emperor of the Empire of Yi Ti, Ling Han, as a sign of my trust, generosity, and thankfulness to the Lady of Harrenhal, Deliana Tully, I am giving as a binding trust of this agreement to assign my 5-year-old daughter from my concubine fee, Yasmina, to serve as concubine and servant to the Lady of Harrenhal. May good fortune rule over you. When? The training grounds. Unknown location near the God's Eye. Leomord Rivers fidgets nervously as he sits on the grass with at least 100 others. The fog makes it near impossible to see the edges of the training grounds, and the snow that is still present with the end of the false winter still continue to fall. He is, however, like every single soul here, present for one thing and one thing only, the future. Being a bastard at Westeros is bad. It is hard to find honest work. People immediately look down on you in hatred, if not in outright disgust. Nobody dare trust you. After all, who would trust a blight from the gods and humans born of sin? Thus it is no wonder that so many bastards turn to theft, banditry, and other more unsavory means to scrape a living. Hunger is a great motivator. Imagine their surprise when a month ago messages come from all Westeros calling all bastards in the name of Deliana Tully, the lady of the newly dubbed Rivendell. Now, not Harrenhal, not only does she offer them a fair pay and a fair job, but she also offers honor and glory to those who answer her call. Many, of course, that Leomord knows, scoff. Glory and honor is something that bastards like him are too far to aspire. Leomord, however, chooses to come. He is hungry, cold, and tired all the time due to the winter. He literally has nothing to lose. Thus here he is sitting with 100 other bastards waiting. Get up! The sudden bark of order makes everyone stand immediately as a 50-year-old man with pasty white skin wearing black robes appeared from the fog. Flanking him are 2 others in black, shiny armor. Leomord gulps. What in the world is he and everyone here have gotten themselves into? The man looks like he can kill you with that blue-eyed stare alone. A couple of miles south of Fort Granger, river border of Rivendell, former Harrenhal. I'm telling you, we should be more careful on crossing the river. What the fuck's wrong with you, Rick? Tells Crabstealer, hisses at the 20-man group he is leading. It is supposed to be 30, but 10 do not make it on the crossing. Their corpses now feed to the fishes below. I'm sorry, it's not as if the river is not icy cold and all these weapons are not making it easy to swim. Hisses Rick, his second in command. Tells rolls his eyes at the whine of the tone of his second in command. If not for the fact that the man is efficient at keeping the other rabble in line, he might have gutted him with his knife. Plus, he can't afford to lose more men now, thanks to the 10 rotting below the river. Like every bandit group in the area, Tell's gang evolves from raiding unwary travelers, straying from the King's Road to raiding small plantations and farms due to the winter, making travelers scarce. Word, however, comes from the grapevine of thieves that the lands of the new Lady of Harrenhal, blessed by the old gods, do not suffer from the after effects of the false winter and are filled with fat and plenty. He is skeptical of taking it for word, of course, but when Mick the Prick's 50-man gang braved the rivers, avoiding the forts that guard the bridges, returned with a large amount of bounty and loot, Tells wastes no time dragging the asses of his group to riches. Unfortunately, it is easier said than done. The rivers that make up the borders of Rivendell are wide, unsurprising given that the infamous longboats are used to sailing through it. Thankfully, they are unguarded, and Tells only lost the idiots in his group who is lousy at swimming. It doesn't mean that it's easy, though. They have to ditch their heavier weapons, opting to use dirks, sickles, and scythes during the crossing. Any heavier, and they are at risk of drowning to their deaths even more. Now here they are, wet, cold, and tired, 20, all quite glad that they are finally once more back at land. Better he can see a road made of stones of all things, not dirt like the King's Road at a distance. If he and his men follow that road, it would not long before they stumble upon an unwary farm which they can then loot. Rick, his second in command, stands up groggily, his soggy clothes making him unbalanced. Come, let us go before the sun starts to rise. Full. He never finishes his words as his right eye pops, replaced with an arrowhead jutting on his skull. Tel's brain freezes at the sudden death of his comrade before it connects the points that they are under attack, just in time for Rick's remaining eye to roll inside his skull before falling on the ground like a marionette. Defend yourselves, he barely has the time to shout, drawing his dirk before 2 more of his men fell, this time pierced with spears by men clad in black leather armor, appearing on the dusk gloom. The last thing that Tell sees as he frantically parries a spear thrust that nearly skewers him is the sight of a leather form leading the ones in black and gray. The curved blade at its hand swings and Tell's scream as his guts are opened without abandon. Fort Granger south of Harrenhal.
Doliana sighs as the cold water splashes over her head, cascading all over her and washing the grime, mud, and blood staining her form. Compared to other southern lords, the cold water does not bother her. She has bathed and worse at Durskaban. Immediately, though, the hands of Yasmina and Emilia are all over her naked form, scrubbing her with towels dipped in rosemary and other oils which she can't identify. Despite her best efforts, the people on this world refuse to let her bathe herself, and thus this too served as her maids-in-waiting, despite the fact that Emilia is a warrior through and through and Yasmina is 6 years old, minus the aging potion. She agrees on letting them serve her only with a very stern reminder that they wear something when they clean her. The last thing that Doliana needs is raging hormones sniffing at her caretakers.
Towels finally drying her, she wordlessly let them drape over her royal violet outfit, a shirt studded with golden buttons, and form-hugging black pants that hugs her long legs. New fashion trend, she asks, out of the tailor's. A shoulder cape is tied on a brooch near her left neck, and Yasmina wordlessly does her hair into many braids. Despite being caught totally off guard by the sudden gift of a concubine from the Emperor of Yiti, Deliana cannot deny that Yasmina does good work. Due to her age, her looks are still pudgy and childish, though it is pathetically obvious that she would not look bad in the future. Her attire is like that of the ancient Chinese ladies in waiting with red, violets, and gold dresses. The girl, however, is terribly competent that even Deliana herself grudgingly admits that she is not all looks and finery. Suffice it to say that when it comes into taking care of a household, she is not that good. No, she is excellent. She can make a dozen kind of teas that can soothe Deliana's mood easy. She is a great seamstress that the Tailors Guild feels a bit inadequate. Her cooking skills are superb, and that's saying something due to Rivendell leading the culinary arts by an extremely wide margin here at Westeros. She can make different kinds of baths for Deliana that makes her smell good in 12 different ways. Her skill on doing Deliana's hair is unique, and for the first time in her life here, Deliana rather loves the new styles added to her look when staring at the mirror. Westery fashion, after all, when it comes to hair care, is literally just pulled long hair and straightened out.
She is terribly silent.
Speaking only when asked at Deliana's presence, and seems to have a knack of knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. If not for the fact that Deliana might converse with her sometimes formally, she might have thought that Yasmina is just a walking robot following her around. On the rare times that Yasmina is off duty of serving her, which is 24/7, as UT concubines are expected to accept that Deliana reduces it to 8, which she protests about before agreeing that she can have 3 hours every day for herself. She can see her chatting with Myrcella and Rhaenys. It's not surprising really for Deliana to see Myrcella getting close to her concubine. She still gets shivers thinking about that fact every time. Myrcella has a heart of gold and can befriend anyone. Deliana is willing to bet that she can turn a Dementor into a fairy if the not-so-little princess puts her heart into it. Wordlessly thanking her 2 aides for dressing her up, Deliana walks outside with Emilia effortlessly falling in behind her as her personal guard. Gray clouds loom overhead, giving the indication of more drizzles of snow later. With at the outermost edge of the weather protecting wards, the forts do not suffer the 100% blessings that the inner territory of Rivendell enjoys. Also, Lord Victor insists on it, since weather patterns can help mold soldiers. The forts, after all, serve as on-the-job training from the boot camp recruits of the Unsullied. When she first saw the camp before, it was manned by a skeleton force of officers aided by recruits. Now, however, the camp is anything but used for boot camp training. Rows upon rows of tents are set up and men are non-stop drilling. The wooden palisades are reinforced with an outside cover of cement and tar. The once empty walls are now fully manned by rotating sentries. The troll groups come in and out non-stop. A huge house that serves as armory has been created with wagon loads of spears, shields, and short swords are being delivered and taken. The blacksmiths are in full-time work as they double-check the scale armor that is slowly being produced to be used as the standard armor for the Unsullied. While leather is all and good, after all, on the deserts and plains of Essos, here where enemy-mounted knights rule supreme, leather armor counts for shit. With the new improvement she ordered, it would allow the Unsullied their quick movement, 4 formations, and at the same time offer them an improvement of protection against the classic foes that they might face here in Westeros. One might ask what prompted Deliana to call on the full manning of her forces. The answer is quite simple. Bandits and highwaymen have been plaguing the territories of Rivendell and its vassal lands ever since the thawing of the false winter. Lyanna might have secured the major entrances to Rivendell via the 4 forts guarding the large bridges that provide access to her lands. The rivers that serve as a natural barrier, however, to her territory have little to no such protection. Sure, it would be impossible for an army to gain access to them. Imagine all those luggy Daenerys trying to transport their armor and horses via swimming. Other than the hard crossing, it would also be easy for a defending force to be mustered and repel any would-be swimmers trying to cross in large numbers. While the rivers fortunately serve as deterrent for any large invading force, it does not prevent, however, any determined bandit and thief group whose main sort of armor is the weather-beaten clothes at their back with the unusual sword, axes, or knives that they carry with them. Lately, since last month, they have been plaguing the borders of Rivendell and causing a large nuisance, though each and every last one of them has been repulsed. Homesteads, though not as defended as a fort, still contains the angry farmer and one of his trained sons, who, mind you, have a full armor kit and a higher motivation compared to the regular bandit raider. Dragon Shit also seems to have taken it as a personal insult, the fact that he cannot secure the lands of his liege, thus the reasoning why, as to the Unsullied, are now out in force at the forts. They serve as bases, after all, for the patrols, and there are many more than usual, now patrolling the border rivers of Rivendell. As for Lyanna, the reasoning why she is here is for experience and to see the damage caused by these thieves and brigands. She is, after all, trained by the sword. Now, thanks to that associate sword teacher she hired and dedicated almost 2 months of her time into, no better way to put her skills to the test. Better than in a die or do situation. Plus, she also wants to see the damage caused by her unwanted guests. To say that she's not pleased would be the understatement of the century. It also, however, points her out to a glaring weakness of her current security measure. Rivendell has strong points, thanks to the presence of the forts and, in smaller cases, the homesteads and towns. However, there are large tracts of land between them, something she is currently resolving with an ongoing solution via recruitment of bastards. Still, what she really needs is a surveillance system that does not require a magical means in her part. There is too much space and too much information that a magical solution cannot fully solve the problem. No, what she needs are people to be her eyes and ears, without anyone else the wiser knowing that they are in the area. Rivendell Training Hall. The sound of clashing steel can be heard as Myrcella watches her 6-year-old friend parry one of the death dealers before jumping back to avoid the swipe of another aimed at her hip. The smile on her face is audible, though, and Myrcella, until now, can't believe what she is seeing. It had happened a week ago. Like her, Lyanna enlisted Rhaenys to be trained on self-defense, seeing that she is 6 already and her body can take the starting rigors of training like she did with Myrcella. Said Princess, of course, is just happy that Rhaenys would finally be able to join them. The Dornish girl has been rather unhappy due to her being left out on hers and Lyanna's spars. Sure, Rhaenys prefer the books and Lyanna's pensy rather than the outdoors, but she obviously wants to be in on their daily spars. Color her surprise that the Dornish girl trounced her and Lyanna in their first bout easily. Of course they at first alluded it to Dumlock, seeing that they were not taking the 6-year-old seriously. When Rhaenys knocked each of them once, twice, 3 times, and even twice together while dual-wielding the 2 sparring swords, it became obvious that the girl was skilled. Myrcella, of course, happily alluded it to magic and, without ado, glomped the nervous Rhaenys, who had no idea how she got so skilled of the blade. Myrcella, after all, believed fully on magic after seeing the old gods bless Rivendell. It would be pretty hard not to. Besides, if Lyanna says it's the right way, then it's the right way. Lyanna, however, seemed not to focus. Then, at a nervous wreck, Rhaenys, but rather at the empty air beside her, her eyes narrowed. For a second, Myrcella thought that the dame was angry about her loss at the practice yard. She just shrugged, however, and patted the small Rhaenys on the head, and giving her one of her confident smiles, telling her to continue her sparring practice, and to eat a lot before walking off. Myrcella, however, had been with Lyanna long enough to know that the dame knew something about Rhaenys that she kept to herself. Oh well, if Lyanna chooses to hide it, then it must be within good reason. She never failed before, and she won't stop now, Marcella happily hums to herself as she continues watching Rhaenys throw her 3 opponents flat on their backs. Her Ray would look so awesome once she's taken the aging potion of Deliana, like her. King's Landing, Red Keep. Get out! Get out! The servant hurriedly scurries away, like a rat in the face of a raging cat, or more like a raging lioness, as the paper he had delivered beforehand zooms like a cannon to where his face was a mere second ago. She refuses. Why does she refuse? Cersei Lannister, Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, screams to no one in particular, as she glares angrily at the annoying piece of paper now crumpled at her floor.
Can't she see that they are using her? That ugly trout. They would rip her to pieces, change her from the lioness that she is to one of those river fish, and sell her to the highest bidder like some piece of meat. Cersei hisses, almost foaming in the mouth, her brain working on overtime. Her daughter, her one and only beloved daughter, carted away from her by her fat pig of a husband, and her father. In the dark, they ripped her away from her arms, away from the protection of her golden lion, and sold to a trout to the Riverlands, to brainwash her where they can then use her like her very own father used her when he sold her to the fat pig of a husband. They will cut off her claws, rip her mane to pieces, take off her fangs, and in the end they would tame the lioness that her daughter would be. Already she can see the damage caused by her father and husband's decision. Her golden-haired daughter refusing to return, preferring her attention to that fish bastard from the Riverlands. Sure, Cersei is thankful for her saving of her daughter, but right now she is keeping her away from her mother and her family, that bastard. Cersei swears she will rip her head off the very moment she had an opportunity. You'll never wed the prince. You'll wed the king. You'll be queen for a time. Then comes another, younger, more beautiful, more powerful, to cast you down and take all you hold dear. The king will have 20 children, and you will have 3. 3 golden crowns, 2 golden shrouds. A princess for the mistress, a princess for the queen. When your tears have drowned you, the talons of the brave and daring shall wrap its claws about your pale white throat and throw you down from the castle you so hold dear. I will not have it. I will not have it. Cersei hisses to herself as the voice of the witch once more echoes inside her head. Automatically her hands grasp the glass of fire whiskey at her table, chugging the entire contents with one gulp, the familiar fiery feeling giving more fuel to the rage inside of her. She is, however, broken out of her usual stupor as one of her ladies-in-waiting knocked. "What is it?" she hisses, not feeling the mood to be polite today. "The Master of Coin, Petyr Baelish, is at the door, your grace." "Great Septa Baelor! What do you mean the taxes of the Riverlands are down?" the High Septon yells, or more like shrieks, as the head Septon of the Riverlands recoils. "It is due to the false winter, your holiness," the old Septon replies. Add the increasing problem of the Riverlands having an overall abundance of grain due to the North no longer buying from them. The lords and the small folk cannot pay the usual tithe. The High Septon grits his teeth at the news. Tithes all over Westeros are at an all-time low due to winter. It is understandable and expected. However, even with winter thawing and the crop rotation of the desperate farmers that planted, despite the weather of the Riverlands and the Reach now growing, tithes should be slowly going back up. However, for some reason, the usual large amount of tithe from the Riverlands and the Reach are not coming along as usual. And where are the damn kingdoms taking their food supply then? If not from the Riverlands and the Reach. The High Septon demands, angrily slapping the armrest of his throne, sending several rings flying from his overly chubby fingers. The Reach, the Crown Lands, and the Riverlands are the faith's, after all, largest places of income when it comes to the collected tithe. Very little comes from the tree-worshipping barbarians from the north, and same from the south, thanks to many of the Dornish still having Rhinar beliefs. The Stormlands gets a fair amount there, but the harshness of the land makes the lords there extremely pragmatic. The Westerlands used to pay large amounts of before, but with the advent of Tywin Lannister taking the seat as Lord Paramount, only the dumbest or the bravest of Septons would dare extort extra there. Thus, the majority of the tithe comes from the Reach and the Riverlands, who usually are thankful for the abundant harvest and the coin rolling from the north and the south. It is practically easy, after all, to convince the small folk and the more pious lords that the gods are the reason for their abundant harvests. The High Septon can care less about their harvests.
The treasury of the faith is in trouble due to their troubles, and he can't have that. Not if he plans to continue the status quo as it is right now and continue his secret life of decadence and pleasure. At the former lands of Harrenhal, your holiness, replies the nervous Septon. At Lady Deliana's domain, she has the monopoly of the entire north, your holiness, and even the west and the south are buying from her. She is not paying the tithe, your holiness. That heretic, how dare she, he roars, spittle almost flying out of his mouth. Of course he knows who Deliana is. No one down the neck, after all, openly declares for the tree gods that the barbarians of the north worship. Personally, he doesn't give a shit whom she bows to. However, due to her damaging the faith, and more importantly, his personal finances, the bastard needs to go, and he has the perfect excuse for it. Get me all the ravens in the sept, he demands, angrily to the Riverland Septon. Your holiness, I said get me the ravens, damn it. Training camp, God's Eye, unknown location. Leomord pants tiredly as he rests with the rest of his squad, a 10-man group inside the mess hall. These days, his entire life is full of soreness, tiredness, and hunger. As the training progresses, Lord Victor promised them during his welcoming speech that all of them would be knights. Them bastards with nothing on their name would be knights with honor, glory, and gold and all that. He can still recall as clearly as day the speech of the old lord. I will break each and every one of you and reform you as knights worthy of the name. You will be knights, but not one that holds lands. You will seek no glory, but glory you will be given. You will be armed with the best armor and weapons that gold can buy. The horses you will ride will be the strongest and the most willful in the entire land. You will be clad with wings as you ride into battle. You will have tactics and strategies that none will understand. You will be the bulwark against injustice, the kings of the battlefield that will fly over their heads. You will be the best of the best, and you will carry with you a dream and a promise that Our Lady Deliana wills. None of the gathered bastards refused. Inspired and forged by the hardness and unfairness of life, they seized the opportunity with both hands, men and women both. None protests about the gender, seeing that the Lady Deliana is an anointed dame herself. Lord Victor has been true to his word. The armor that they are given to train is a series of interconnected plates with the most ornate design he has ever seen. The weapons are also custom-made, dedicated to each and every one of them. Same goes with their helmets. All are brand news and cost almost as a year wages each. Their horses are big and strong, nothing that Leomord has ever seen or ridden on. Given to him is a gray roan that looks like it can chew him up and spit him for breakfast. Thus their training begins. Horseback riding, cleaning of their weapons, jogging, running, sparring, jousting, crossbow training, archery, classes on etiquette, and tactics. So much tactics that it makes Leomord's head spin. Values and morality, and a repetition of the value of human life. All in all, it is a tiring work that makes Leomord feels as if his entire day is one big punishment. But he knows he's changed. He's no longer that laid-back farmer toiling his master's field. No, he is something else now, a knight forged by training with bonds to his team and to his new family. His will is iron and his purpose clear. No more lanky and thin, but tall and full of muscle, thanks to the continuous pumping of food and drink the cafeteria provides for them. Yes, Lord Victor promised them a title that would make them proud on their very first battle and charge. You would remember it to your dying day, the old lord declares, and Leomord can't wait. He plans to earn his wings and place soon once he rides on the battlefield. Leomord will not be found wanting when the time comes.
Rivendell private quarters of important guests.
Cold air blows continuously from the east, making the transparent curtains fly on the open archways of her room. Down below, one can see the entirety of the lands controlled by Rivendell that stretches to the horizon. Beautiful. Isn't it, Sitter Arthur? The small voice of Rhaenys says in almost a whisper as her eyes greedily drink the view. Is this how my ancestors see the world at the back of dragons? Maybe, Your Highness. Unfortunately, I am not so blessed to have experienced living during the times when your family is at the height of its power. Rhaenys replies as she once more admires the beauty provided by the view. So if I might make an observation, Your Highness, I might say the view must also be the same at Dragonback, only less safer and more unstable. Personally, I prefer that you experience this view, Your Highness, rather than the one experienced by your ancestors. Rhaenys replies only with a beatific smile at her ever-present protector and guardian. Sir Arthur Dayne has been a constant presence in her life, even from before. He was always kind to her when he's on duty, sneaking her treats and extra food for Balerion, her cat. He would shy her away when those disapproving, angry eyes of her grandfather would wander to her, when she was stabbed 100 times and her body thrown over the walls of the Red Keep to the dark chasms of the waters below. It was Sir Arthur Dayne who appeared to her as a ghost, her constant companion throughout the endless cycle of life and death. A cheerful squeal, followed by a loud, familiar voice of protest, makes Rhaenys look down from the railing of her room. Down below, she can espy Myrcella practicing one more with Lady Amelia, the head of the Death Dealers, serving as Lady Diliana's personal guards. Judging from the pissed-off tone coming from Myrcella, her friend is getting her ass handed to her once more. No words can describe as to how Rhaenys counts her luck on having Myrcella Baratheon in her life. It is quite ironic that the daughter of the usurper who bashed the chest of her father and overthrew her future would be the one she cared the most. Her mother once told her never to trust people. As a princess, they would attempt to befriend her due to her status, name, and the opportunity to elevate themselves through her. Rhaenys is 4 years old when the sack of King's Landing happened. She learned, and she learnt well. That's why, other than her Dornish cousins, Rhaenys never had true friends. Myrcella's different, though. Ever since the very first meeting of theirs, the daughter of Robert Baratheon never saw her as Rhaenys Targaryen. No. For Myrcella, Rhaenys is just Ray, the friend she fools around with, who steals sweet cakes with at the middle of the night, who she gushes about when it comes to the movies at the Pensieve, the friend she has no issues on showing that she shamelessly drools on the night when sleeping. Yes, she does care for Myrcella Baratheon. She cares about her a lot. Myrcella may be a princess, but here at the fantastical castle of Rivendell, Myrcella's Cella, the golden-haired girl who is her best friend, whom she would give the world to if she only asks. And Rhaenys would rather be Ray in this world. It surely is 1,000 times better than her previous life as a princess. Don't get her wrong, she loves her mother, and she would always dream of putting a dagger on the skull of the monster that defiled and killed her. At her heart, revenge continues to bring embers on it. It is, however, tempered by fear. Rhaenys has experienced death 1,000,000 times over, and she doesn't wish to add another one on that number. I'm going to spend time watching a movie at the Pensieve. Will you stay here till then, Sir Arthur? Rhaenys turns to the knight, who simply bows. I will stay by your side, princess, as my duty. Please, do try and enjoy yourself, the ghost replies. That's great, Rhaenys smiles, turning away as she heads to the library where the Lady Diliana placed her pensieve for Myrcella's and Rhaenys' use. She wants to watch the world of Pandora again with its fantastical beasts and people tonight. Rivendell restricted area of the library. You play a dangerous gamble, Sir Arthur Dayne. Diliana's stern voice catches the attention of the ghostly knight, whose hand wanders to the transparent sheath at its side. Everything in life is a gamble, Planewalker, is the ghost's simple reply. Not averting his eyes from watching the waters of the Pensieve swirl around the head of Rhaenys, there are consequences in what you are doing. A soul tribute can reduce your soul to nothingness. There would be no afterlife for you. No eternal rest at the end of the mountain road. There would simply be nothing. You will be nothing more than a memory on the pages. And I've accepted that. I am a knight of the Kingsguard. My purpose is my life and my duty is my honor. As I am today, I am useless to her as nothing more than a spectator. By merging my soul with hers, what I have will be hers and she will survive. Death cannot be averted by the skills of the sword, Sir Arthur, as you yourself experienced, Diliana points out. But it can increase your chances of living. You are adamant on this? A slender eyebrow asks. I am. How much time will I have left with the soul tribute ongoing? The ghost asks. At most, a year, maybe a year and a half. Enough time for you to wean her out of your presence, constantly being there. I suggest letting her spend more time with Myrcella, Amelia, or even Yasmina. They can relate to her and can help her acclimatize on this life when you are finally gone. Sir Arthur. But not you, Lady Diliana, the ghostly head asks, in turn. A wry smile simply appears on Diliana's lips. I am the mistress of death, Sir Arthur. I hold no companions, no friends, no family. It is my fate. It is always my fate. Compared to Myrcella, I am not good. I am the gray against the black and the white. A master or mistress of death's only companions are contentment, grief, regret, and greatness. I choose greatness. The knight's face is stern, but for a split second, a spark of pity and gentleness appears on those transparent eyes. You underestimate the kindness of humanity, Planewalker. You underestimate the ones you love. They might surprise you if you give them the chance. I doubt it, Sir Arthur, but we'll see. Westerlands, Casterly Rock. The midday sun shines brightly through the blue-tinted glass of private solar of Lord Tywin Lannister. For any normal observer, it would be quite surprising to see that the old lion prefers to use the color blue instead of the gold and red that is favored by his house. For the people that know Tywin Lannister personally, this is just an example of how pragmatic the Lord of the Westerlands is when it comes to his duty to his house. Blue-tinted glass, after all, provides a rest for his eyes instead of the bright red that shines quite sharply in the midday sun. Lessening the stress on his eyes allows him more time to put into attention much of the matters that needs his immediate attention. Just like the matter today. In the private room of his solar, Tywin Lannister allows himself to show one of his rare, pleased smiles as he stares at the private armor currently standing on its rack. Covered in red, Dulionite, beaten, and designed specifically to accentuate his armor aesthetics, it now doesn't look like an ornate piece of suit, but rather a proper representation of the power and wealth of House Lannister. One might think that the old lion would be pissed as hell about the rather abrupt breaking of their deal about his monthly shipment of Dulionite from Rivendell, previously Harrenhal. He is not, surprisingly, and with for good reason. The Iron Bank does not ask. It demands. That is a saying that those in power would be wise to always remember what the bank wants. It gets. It is actually not surprising for the bank to get a monopoly for the rare mineral. It is, after all, a great source of money in their hands, both the supplier and the producer. He knows that if Deliana said no, the bank would still get what it wants, with the exception of her probably missing a head or dying in a ditch somewhere. The bank is fair, however, in all its dealings, as it is well known to, thus Deliana's decision. He understands. Of course, the Lady of Rivendell is not so stupid as to forget about their old deal completely. No. Part of the contract between Rivendell and the Iron Bank is a clause stating that he, Tywin Lannister, be able to buy first at every season of market of the bank with a discount. So, in a way, he still gets what he wants. It is a better choice, even for him, Tywin admits. A dead Deliana means the Iron Bank controlling the Delionite mines, and that is no assurance to him being their primary buyer. The free cities, after all, have enough rich people that can challenge even him gold-wise. Wise and wary, why can't my children be more like her? Tywin grumbles mentally, his good mood evaporating as fast as it came. Jimmy stuck as a Kingsguard, and Cersei, despite being queen, is slowly alienating even more and more people against her. She also spends a lot of gold that Tywin has to increase her daily stipend 3 times this month alone. What that girl is up to, only the gods know. Tywin curses under his breath before returning to his work. Messages of every kind litters in his desk in an orderly fashion. They are all blank-sealed. However, no need for his correspondence to his spies all over Westeros to be found by some random knight or guard, thanks to an unsuspecting letter filled with lion seals. Things in the capital are surprisingly silent for King's Landing, as silent as King's Landing can possibly be. A norm seems to have settled on the capital of the Seven Kingdoms for some reason, with each piece moving as expected. However, telltale signs seem to be brewing around the other kingdoms for some reason. According to his spies, many of the lords from the Riverlands, Vale, Crownlands, and the Reach seem to be calling their fighting forces. Not, of course, enough to their full strength. That is the norm during warfare, but rather enough to be noticeable for any sharp observer. The Septons also seem to be more active as usual on their preaches, and the emphasis, it seems, are more into the sin and hatred of bastardry and the threat of heretical religion. More pious lords seems to be contributing a lot of money to their local septs more than usual, also. Tywin frowns at that. While things here at the West seems to be quiet thanks to his tight rule, maybe it would be wise to recall at least his cavalry for a routine exercise just in case. If the Faith Militant is planning to have another attempt at a rise thanks to Robert's inane ruling, it would be bad not just for the crown, but for everyone else. Better nip it at the bud before it grows into something more. First things first, though, he better summon Rhaenys, the representative of the Septons here at the Westerlands, for some questions of his own. Last, he recalls, there are 7 fingers left at the man's hands. North Winterfell. Editor Ned Stark sighs tiredly as he sits on the familiar shades of the heart tree. Once more, he welcomes the silence that accompanies the presence of the Godswood. It is certainly a lot quieter here compared to the keep of Winterfell. To say that things are hectic would be a complete understatement right now in the place he calls home. Ever since the Roar, the other Lords of the North have been extremely vocal about their protest about his decision to replace the sept that his wife worships on. The Northern Lords call it divine justice. Cat calls it bad construction, and Ned is stuck between if he sides with the Northern Lords, he will be facing a day-to-day glare from Cat, and not to mention she would be quite literally a pain in the ass to deal with, something that is extremely inconvenient if you're a Lord Paramount. On the other hand, if he sides with Cat, the Northern Lords would revolt faster than he can fart. Southerners, after all, are heavily mistrusted, if not hated, by many of the Northerners. It does not help that shortly after the Roar, Deleana's declaration to the old gods and miracle at the newly dubbed Rivendell only reinforced the Northerners' faith that the old gods are working again in power. Thus a tenuous compromise has been set by Ned. In order to placate the Northerners and at the same time keep a semblance of peace at his home, Cat would be free to worship at her sept, but only the Northerners, who is devout at the Seven, can go there. It is an ugly compromise, but a compromise nevertheless that leaves many Northern Lords grumbling angrily. Still, the loyalty to the Stark name won, and despite the Great John personally visiting and trying to swing a warhammer at the sept to prove his point that the Southerners' gods are wrong, the new sept remain intact, despite the rather large crack at its side. Inside his house, things are starting to go loud. Also, Robb develops a friendship with the Greyjoy boy, and little Arya seems to make it her life's intention to make her older sister's life miserable via pranks. Little Brandon is still a baby. Jon, on the other hand, is now treated a lot better after the Roar, but Catelyn Tully seems to take it a personal insult to her as she treats the boy even more harshly and degrading. Ned, of course, wants to step in, but the very attitude of Catelyn is the shield that Jon's life depends on. As long as he carries the stigma and Catelyn's ire, his life would remain safe. It is a better alternative than having a caved chest, courtesy of Robert for being Rhaegar's son. Ned himself, on the other hand, is besieged by work more than usual. The settlement at Sea Dragon Point is started to being mapped and explored by the Green Men that Deleana sent. Surprisingly, many of the Northerners are welcoming of them, disregarding the fact that they are Southerners. Of course, it may be because they are also worshippers of the old gods, or simply the goodwill that Deleana provided for them due to her continuous supply of food from the false winter. The Northerners rather has a high opinion of the little lady. The North itself has enough money to kickstart their economy due to her fair prices, and the passage south, disregarded due to the trade route of long ships, makes things easier for many Northern purses. Not all is well and dandy, though. House Bolton is literally in trouble as the Dreadfort collapsed on itself, after the Roar killing Rose. Now Demeric is recalled from the Vale, where he is being fostered, but the young boy of 7 has no knowledge of ruling the land of his forefathers, or the rather large amount of men it holds. Ned has to choose a seneschal later to send in order to keep the Bolton line stable and under wraps. The last thing he needs is some idiot whispering to the impressionable young lad about the bloody desires of the Red Kings of old. While the North does food, however, due to the supply line to Rivendell, it is becoming pathetically obvious that said supply line is being stretched. Rice is slowly becoming a commodity that is highly favored due to its practicability and taste. It is exotic. Also, and is slowly being bought by many, if only for the novel. For the Northerners, however, it is a need, but with everyone else buying with higher prices, that means that the preference of the markets of rice is turning to someone else. Only problem is that there is only one source of rice at Westeros. What Ned needs is a way to make Deleana Tully agree for a monotony of rice at the North, or at least a specific quota. He has no idea what to offer, though. If not for the fact that it is a heart tree that is nearest to him, Ned Stark would have happily drawn ice and hacked the nearest bark in frustration. Astapor, Slaver's Bay. Dragon shit hates coming back here. It reminds him of darkness, death, and decay. Slavery at its finest. He knows, however, that realistically speaking, this is his only choice. There are too many recruits back at Rivendell, and there are too few of him and his brothers to train them properly. Westerosi are proud of their freedom. However, none of them other than those that employ at the bounty hunting guild can fight for shit. He needs more manpower, and he needs those that knows and thinks like him. Purchasing men like him makes him want to vomit his lunch and dinner, but for the sake of the goddess that needs him performing at his utmost best, he would swallow his disgust and pride. Thus he asked Master Floki from Portsmouth to sail him here on his fastest ships that he can spare. Master Draco. Or is it dragon shit? I remember you very well being whipped on the plaza, the sleazy master that greets them at the gates, says, making Draco want to skewer him with his spear head to toe. How dare the bastard use the name given to him in a whim by his goddess, who dislikes the demeaning title given to him. 30,000 gold. He simply replies, nodding at two of his companions who drag a wagon full of gold dragons at the front of the master. 2,000 unsullied to be filled on the longboats. Oh, and to business, Master Draco, immediately. Would you like to enter the plaza for some refreshments? You would enjoy watching your brothers come into formation. I'm sure it would bring fond memories of the boats in the afternoon, Draco replies with gritted teeth before marching back to the longboats. He needs to get out before he accidentally causes an international incident by murdering the slaver. His goddess could not have that. Not while she has no army at her back, and Cole at least. Draco swears by the old gods that he would make her the best one